Chapter 385. PSHHH. Sword 11's feet brushed against the ground as he retreated in a straight line. Wherever he passed, the force under his feet poured out and spread along the ground, causing the surrounding floor to crumble inch by inch. He only managed to stabilize his body after a full 10 feet. Without a doubt, Sword 11's movements were much greater and the scene was horrifying. Everyone's expression changed, and some people's eyes fiercely twitched. From what they saw, it seemed that not only did Sword 11's water attribute Yuan Qi not suppress Su Yi, he was even at a slight disadvantage. This made many people stare with wide eyes and tongue-tied. Very strong. Su Yi looked at 11's sword in front of him as he sighed in admiration in his heart. The former was indeed at the 4th level essence spirit stage, and his strength was so formidable. Su Yi had already gone all out, using the ultimate move of the heavenly phase ancient scripture, the ancient crimson seal. Yet, he was still unable to gain the slightest advantage. Su Yi knew that if he had not relied on the supreme art of origin and the body of the guardian deity, if he had only used the ancient crimson seal, it would not have been so easy to contend against the 11th sword. If anyone knew what Su Yi was thinking at this moment, they would be speechless. With the cultivation of the 3rd level of origin spirit stage, and almost using all his strength, which meant that he was not truly using all his strength, he was able to contend against Sword 11, who was at the 4th level of origin spirit stage. Su Yi was still rather dissatisfied. Did he not want others to live? Furthermore, Sword 11 was ranked 15th in the Sword Pagoda. He was definitely not someone an ordinary 4th level of origin spirit stage practitioner could compare to. At this moment, Sword 11 was even more shocked. With his palm facing down, his 5 fingers slightly curled into a fist as he secretly trembled. At this moment, only Sword 11 himself knew that his palm was almost completely numb. If not for the fact that he had some methods to pour out a lot of his strength, his palm would have been shattered. Looking at the extraordinary youth before him, Sword 11 finally understood why Hua Dongxiu was defeated in one move. Such an outer disciple was much more terrifying than the rumors said he was. You already have the qualifications to make me use my sword. YW, said Sword 11 indifferently. He was still as cold as ever. He shook his hand, and a 3-foot-long sword appeared in his hand. This treasured sword was extremely special. Its entire body was a type of dazzling black color, and it was suffused with ancient symbols. It emitted a faint radiance and emitted a wave of pressure. Sword 11 shook his arm, and the water attribute Yuan Qi in his body suddenly changed, and a thick and continuous earth attribute Yuan Qi rushed towards the sword in his hand. Buzz! In an instant, the treasured sword let out a sound like the clanging of wind and thunder, as if it was alive. A vast and mighty pressure filled the square, faintly causing the ground to tremble. Treasure, there's definitely a treasure. Su Yi's eyes lit up as he stared at the treasured sword in Sword 11's hand. This was definitely a treasure. Su Yi's keen soul force told him that the sword in Sword 11's hand was definitely beyond the dark weapon level. It was much higher than the treasured sword in Hua Dongxiu's hand not long ago. Sword 11 looked at Su Yi, and the treasured sword in his hand was suffused with black light. The ancient symbols on the sword body seemed to be flowing, revealing a kind of mysterious mystery. But the sword light faintly emitted cut through the air, causing the surrounding air to fluctuate. Finally going to use your full strength, slightly raising his eyes, Su Yi did not have any carelessness. Feeling the aura on Sword 11's body at this moment, Su Yi's imperceptible expression also became a little more serious. Next was Sword 11's true strength. To be able to make me use my full strength, you have already surprised me. I have indeed underestimated you, but you should know that as a disciple of Shunjian Gate, what I'm best at is not fists, but swords. When his voice slowly fell on Sword 11's face, his eyes were deep, and a kind of confident expression gushed out. He moved his arms. The treasured sword resounded like wind and thunder, and the aura on his body completely changed. In an instant, Sword 11 seemed to have changed into another person. A sharp and heavy aura filled the air. One man and one sword stood there, as if they were unshakable. Senior Brother Sword 11 is going to use his full strength. Everyone was shocked. Sword 11 pulled out his sword, which was undoubtedly tantamount to proving Su Yi's strength. No one present doubted the strength of the outer sect disciple anymore. Just by making Sword 11 use his full strength, even if he was really defeated in the end, it could not deny the terror of Su Yi. I didn't expect Sword 11 to use his full strength. In the distance, the extraordinary young men and women on the back of the flying savage beasts also began to tremble, revealing a complicated expression of shock. Looking at Sword 11, Su Yi's eyes flashed with light. That man and sword, the aura was invisibly different. Sword, Su Yi murmured in his heart. He had rarely practiced sword arts, but he had some understanding of saber arts. However, Su Yi was not completely clueless about swordsmanship. There were sword arts in the heavenly demon ancient scripture, and there was more than one set. For example, in the demon spirit truth, there was the ice shadow sword art. Not long ago in the sword cave, Su Yi had some understanding of the nameless broken sword art, and had some gains. Pull out your sword. I'll give you a chance to have a fair fight. Sword 11 looked at Su Yi. As a disciple of the Xinjiang Gate, the sword was his foundation and also his trump card. Having a sword in his hand was his strongest strength. Sword 11's fighting spirit was aroused. He wanted to have a real fight with Su Yi. If he could not defeat the young man in front of him today, he was afraid that it would become an obstacle on his path of cultivation. Looking at Sword 11, whose aura was incomparably sharp and cold, Su Yi's eyes moved slightly under the gazes of everyone around the square. Then, his hand reached into his chest, and a 3-foot-long sword appeared in his palm. This sword came from Hua Dongxiu, who was on the 15-sword peak not long ago. Although such a treasure sword did not seem to be at the level of Sword 11's treasure sword, it was already priceless. Su Yi estimated that it was probably close to a spirit weapon. Clang! The crisp sound of the sword resounded, spreading over the small square. Looking at the 3-foot-long sword in Su Yi's palm, the surrounding gazes were slightly surprised. Originally, everyone thought that Su Yi would pull out the strange broken sword on his back. Otherwise, why would this guy carry that broken sword all day long? Isn't that Hua Dongqiu's rainbow sword? Among the crowd, there were disciples who recognized the sword in Su Yi's hand and were very surprised. That was Hua Dongqiu's treasure. They did not know how it ended up in Su Yi's hands. You still don't know, right? This Su Yi will take everything from anyone he defeats. If there's nothing, don't provoke him. Someone beside him lowered his voice and informed him. Under everyone's gaze outside the training hall, Su Yi did not show mercy to the disciples on the 15th sword peak. Chapter 386. I'm not very good at swordsmanship, but if you want to use a sword, I can accompany you. On the small square, Su Yi looked at Sword 11 and said. As his voice fell, he suddenly closed his eyes slightly and raised the sword in his hand to his shoulder. In an instant, on this small square, 2 figures faced each other, and 2 invisible and powerful auras confronted each other. A crimson primordial chi light and a deep black primordial chi light were tumbling, like flames. The scorching temperature and powerful aura caused the surrounding void to tighten. Under the invisible power, the disciples around dared not approach. Looking at the 2 extraordinary young people in the square, the whole square fell into silence. Everyone knew that at this time, both of them were going to use their strongest strength. In terms of swordsmanship, how can an outer disciple be a match for Senior Brother Sword 11? Senior Brother Sword 11 cultivates swordsmanship, which comes from our Xinjiang Gate and is not taught to outsiders. Outer disciples can't compare with him. Don't think about it. Su Yi, the fist and palm techniques he just used are also extraordinary. They are not inferior to Senior Brother Sword 11. A moment later, in the tense atmosphere, someone whispered, "Is Brother Su Yi also proficient in swordsmanship?" Looking at the square, Zhang Qing was shocked. How can this guy be so strong? Is he also proficient in swordsmanship? In the crowd, the young man who had been taught a lesson by Su Yi in the sword hall a few days ago looked very gloomy. He has some strength, but he is no match for the captain. Among the dozens of disciples of the torture hall present, a young man looked slightly gloomy. They were very clear about Sword 11's strength. The previous barehanded moves were just a warm-up. Sword 11 with a sword in his hand was the real Sword 11. He closed his eyes. This guy is so arrogant. Does he want to die? He's too arrogant. He doesn't even look at senior brother Sword 11. Someone noticed that Su Yi's eyes were closed. This was too arrogant. In the entire Divine Sword sect, even the top few monstrous geniuses in the Sword Pagoda would not dare to face the 11th sword so arrogantly. On the square, a group of middle-aged men and women in deacon attire stood together and watched from afar. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. Have you noticed that Su Yi seems a little strange? The best new W.Z. Section P Supra among the deacons. There was a look of surprise in their eyes. They seemed to have sensed that something was amiss. Something is wrong, but I can't put my finger on it, a middle-aged woman said. Her eyes were fixed on Su Yi. She also felt that there was something special about him. I seem to feel a kind of sword essence. A middle-aged man spoke. From Su Yi's body, he could faintly sense a sword intent. Sword intent? How is that possible? That Su Yi is only at the origin spirit stage. A deacon shook his head. Sword intent was a realm that many swordsmen dreamed of. This state had nothing to do with cultivation, but came from the way of the sword. Rumor had it that sword intent came from the unity of form, spirit, emotion, and reason. It was the coordination of the real and the illusory. It was not only an accident, but also contained within the image. It was a legendary state where a swordsman's comprehension of the sword had reached an unprecedented level. It was called sword intent. Generally speaking, if a swordsman at the origin emperor stage could comprehend his own sword intent, he would already be a genius. The origin spirit stage was too immature. How could he reach such a height? One had to know that sword intent was an extension of the origin. This origin belonged only to the sword. It was the origin of the sword. Su Yi's body is full of mystery. Even if it's not sword intent, it's still extraordinary. The middle-aged deacon who had just spoken spoke. Her eyes were shining. She could feel that the formless aura coming from that outer court disciple was definitely different from others. Jianxi was also looking at Su Yi. Under the fierce aura around him, his eyes rippled. As the only person involved, Jianxi could feel that even though that guy had closed his eyes arrogantly, it gave him a feeling that it was difficult to make a move. Only now did Jianxi know that this youth was not arrogant, but was already preparing. The man in sword before him stood quietly. It did not seem to be a sword move, but more like a kind of aura that revealed an invisible aura. Jian Wushuang was looking for a flaw, but that extremely ordinary and simple posture made it impossible for him to find any flaw. It was as if no matter what angle he attacked from, the sword in Su Yi's hand would always be aimed at him. Jianxi was completely moved. As a swordsman, he would not think that this was a coincidence. Perhaps his opponent's comprehension of the sword had also reached a level that exceeded his expectations. With his eyes slightly closed, the posture Su Yi maintained at this moment was exactly the same as the posture on the mural in the sword cave. At some point in time, the 3-foot-long sword in Su Yi's hand gradually emitted the faint sound of wind and thunder. It was filled with brilliance. A fierce aura was faintly fluctuating and rippling around him. Jianxi's face was no longer cold, and there was shock in his eyes. The youth before him was unmoving like a mountain. It was clearly the most ordinary posture, but at this moment, it gave off an unshakable feeling. It was as if that posture contained endless potential and pressure. It was indescribably wonderful. Jianxi even seemed to be able to feel that once he attacked, the former's ordinary posture would cause a storm and a fierce attack would sweep out in all directions. But Jianxi was not an ordinary person. The sword in his hand was hissing, and his eyes were fixed on Su Yi. There was no fear. Instead, A surge of battle intent seeped out from his deep eyes and covered them. It seems that your accomplishments in the sword are not low. Then let's make one move. Go all out. If I win, follow me back to the torture chamber. If I lose, I'll leave the torture chamber henceforth. There was a black light flickering in his eyes. Jianxi's eyes were filled with a fiery battle intent. He was Jianxi, and his strongest strength was in the sword in his hand. If he could not defeat the youth before him, it would become an obstacle in his cultivation path. He had to win this battle. Buzz! As Jianxi's voice faded, sword light erupted from the sword in his hand. The sword light flickered like a spirit snake swimming. At the same time, the aura of the 4th level origin spirit stage was completely released from his body, sweeping out with a bang. Plah! Yuan Qi swept under his feet as Jianxi's figure shot out. His figure was like a blurry black shadow that instantly disappeared. The air tore apart, and the sword in the 11th sword's hand vibrated at the same time. His wrist shook, and the sword light turned into a blurry shadow. The incomparably sharp air cut through the air, causing the air to ripple like water, emitting swoosh, swoosh, swoosh sounds of breaking the wind. In an instant, sword light exploded out one after another, practically enveloping the surrounding space. Chapter 387. UX knew fastest time up, R swoosh swoosh. The sword light was like lightning, extremely sharp. Streaks of sharp sword chi spread out, filling the square and sweeping in all directions, causing the eyes of the disciples present to tremble. The 11th sword is actually so powerful. The deacons present were also full of shock. They had all witnessed the achievements of the 11th sword, and his future was limitless. That's Su Yi. Can he still withstand it? This is the real, full strength of the 11th sword. I'm afraid that Su Yi won't be able to withstand it. In this short period of time, there were also people present who were worried about Su Yi. But at this moment, no one would think that Su Yi was overestimating himself. Even if he was defeated in this battle, it had already proven how terrifying he was. Chi. At this critical moment, under the eyes of everyone present, Su Yi's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and 2 rays of sword light swept out from the depths of his eyes. At the same time, from Su Yi's body, an extraordinary aura, accompanied by a great pressure, spread out. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Su Yi moved, the treasure sword in his hand directly stabbed out. The sword light was dazzling, and also carried a sharp sound of breaking wind, fiercely picking up the former sword light that was enveloping down. Clang, 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 clang. Immediately, the sound of metal clashing rang out, bringing with it a violent gust of wind that surged out from the place where the two of them collided. Hula, in an instant, a strong wind swept through the square, and some of the spectators nearby retreated in panic. The sword light was dazzling, and the wind was violent, making it difficult for the deacons present to peer into it, and their hearts were shocked. A strong wind swept out, the violent wind and the sharp sword light burst out, and a gray figure staggered back. Ding, ding. The figure's feet rubbed against the ground as he was shaken back in a straight line. The mottled stone floor turned into powder, and the fine cracks on the ground climbed up. After a few feet, he stabilized his body. His black hair was disheveled, and his gray robe was torn in several places. On his left arm and left shoulder, there were 2 bloody sword scars. However, the wounds were very shallow and were only sword scars. This was Su Yi's current situation. He seemed to be in a rather sorry state, and his face was deathly pale. Defeated. Su Yi is defeated. He is injured. The surrounding onlookers were stunned for a moment, and then there was an expected exclamation from the crowd. Humph! How could he be a match for me? Among the dozens of Discipline Hall disciples, there was a youth whose eyes were filled with a cold light. He had always believed that Su Yi would definitely lose. So I lost in the end. Even if I lose, I've already proven myself. Discussions broke out among the onlooking disciples, and some sighed with regret. An outer sect disciple who had appeared out of nowhere finally came to a halt after sweeping through everything in his path. He was defeated by the disciplinary hall's 11th sword. In the field, Su-yi turned a deaf ear to the discussions around him. Holding the treasured sword in his hand, he slightly raised his eyes and looked at the gradually dissipating energy wind. There, a black figure appeared, becoming clearer and clearer. The black figure was dressed in a black battle suit and a gray robe that fluttered in the wind, outlining his straight body. He was as tall and straight as a sword peak, and the extraordinary treasured sword in his hand was suffused with radiance and emitted a buzzing sound. Seeing this scene, everyone seemed to have an idea in their hearts. After all, 11th Sword was ranked 15th on the Sword Pagoda, and the outer sect disciple Su-yi was still defeated. Something doesn't seem right. Suddenly, someone revealed a look of surprise. He saw that 11th Sword's cold face had a dull expression at this moment, and there was some confusion and shock in his eyes as he looked at Su-yi. Someone was stunned and carefully sized him up. Suddenly, 11th Sword's chest began to be drenched, and blood began to seep out. On 11th Sword's chest, a bloody hole had appeared at some point in time. If the wound was a little lower, the consequences would be unimaginable. At the same time, a mouthful of dark red blood flowed out of 11th Sword's mouth, and his face suddenly turned pale. No, it seems that senior brother 11th Sword has lost. Looking at 11th Sword, everyone's eyes flickered with shock. It seemed that Su-yi had not lost, and the one who had lost was 11th Sword. Those who thought that Su-yi would definitely lose were completely replaced by shock at this moment. No one would have thought that the final result would be that the dignified 11th Sword was defeated. The shock of the deacons at this moment was no less than that of any disciple. Even they did not see clearly how the 11th Sword had been injured. The move that Su-yi just performed is already broken away from an ordinary sword move. Even if he did not comprehend the true sword intent, he is not far from it. To be able to break 11th Sword's full-strength sword move and injure him with one sword move, this Su-yi is definitely not an ordinary outer sect disciple. He comes from the 36th Sword Peak. I think it's definitely not simple. After a long time, a deacon exhaled deeply, unable to hide the shock in his eyes. In the messy square, Su-yi stood quietly, with disheveled hair, looking very embarrassed. 11th Sword raised his eyes and looked at Su-yi's shock. His eyes twitched a little, and his whole body was a little stiff. I lost. After a while, 11th Sword sighed softly, and the expression on his face faded slightly, restoring the cold look. Lost. Senior brother 11th Sword has lost. Although the present disciples of Shunjian Gate had already seen that 11th Sword had lost and seemed to be more seriously injured, they could not help but feel shocked when they heard 11th Sword admit defeat. He really won. Brother Su-yi really won. Zhang Qing and others clenched their fists, and their eyes were trembling with excitement. They did not expect that even 11th Sword of the Torture Hall would be defeated. That guy was so strong. Hearing 11th Sword's words, Su-yi smiled faintly, put away the sword in his hand as if nothing had happened, and said to 11th Sword, "I said, if you block me, I will still defeat you." I was still careless. If I fought with my life on the line, it's not certain who would win and who would lose. 11th Sword raised his eyes and looked at Su-yi as he said this. Su-yi's eyes moved slightly. Naturally, he knew that his sword just now was a killing move. There was no killing intent, but it was a killing move, and in the end, it only injured 11th Sword. Su-yi could also feel that although 11th Sword had used all his strength just now, there seemed to be a feeling that he had not had enough, as if he still had some kind of trump card. 11th Sword could be ranked 15th in the Sword Pagoda in a big sect like Xinjiang Gate. How could this guy be simple? I said, the sword is not my forte. After a pause, Su-yi said indifferently. 11th Sword seemed to have a trump card, but he also held back. Then I hope I can have a chance to really fight at the Myriad Sword Conference. Chapter 388. As soon as he finished speaking, Sword 11 turned around and left. Captain, dozens of disciples of the disciplinary hall crowded around him, their faces filled with complicated expressions. I said that I will withdraw from the disciplinary hall. It's up to you whether you want to capture him or not. Sword 11 said to the group of disciples of the disciplinary hall. He was about to turn around and leave when he suddenly looked back at Su Yi and asked, "Can you tell me, what kind of swordsmanship was that?" "I don't know either. If I have to give a name, I'll call it killing sword technique." Su Yi replied, "Killing sword technique." Sword 11 whispered, "To me, swords are not for viewing. A real sword is a weapon used to pierce into the enemy's body and cause harm. No matter how strong the swordsmanship is, no matter how beautiful the sword moves are, the final result is a fact. When you unsheath the sword, your goal is to pierce into the enemy's body. You can completely omit all unnecessary movements. Only the two movements of drawing the sword and piercing into the enemy's body are the most important. Therefore, it's called killing sword technique." Su Yi's eyes flashed. He had comprehended this from the mural. Drawing the sword and piercing. Sword 11 muttered to himself, as if he had comprehended something. Killing sword technique? What kind of swordsmanship is that? All the disciples were discussing this. It was the first time they had heard of such a swordsmanship. It seemed to make some sense, but it was difficult to comprehend. "Thank you." Sword 11 looked at Su Yi and nodded. To everyone's surprise, he actually bowed to Su Yi. Then, primordial chi formed under his feet and turned into a beast shadow, soaring into the air. "Captain!" All the disciples of the disciplinary hall were shocked as they watched Sword 11 leave. Then, the dozens of disciples of the disciplinary hall locked their gazes on Su Yi. Their expressions were complicated. There was shock, anger, gloom, and fear. "What, you want to fight?" Su Yi's gaze swept across the group of disciples of the disciplinary hall. Traces of awe flashed across his calm face. "Su Yi, our disciplinary hall's duty is to capture you and bring you back. You'd better surrender and come back with us. Do you really think that you're a match for so many of us?" Among the disciples of the disciplinary hall, there was an extraordinary youth who gritted his teeth and looked at Su Yi as he spoke. At this moment, there were dozens of disciplinary hall disciples behind him. Every single one of them was at the essence spirit realm, with quite a few of them being at the second level of the essence spirit realm. As for himself, he was at the third level of the essence spirit realm. With so many people, he did not believe that they could not deal with Su Yi. "Surrender or don't blame me for being rude." The other disciples of the disciplinary hall were also as they heard the youth's words. There were dozens of disciplinary hall disciples present. No matter how strong Su Yi was, he did not believe that he could defeat so many of them. Although the disciples of the disciplinary hall had regained their confidence, there was still some fear in their eyes when they looked at Su Yi. Su Yi's gaze swept across the group of disciplinary hall disciples. Every single one of them was at the Yuan spirit stage and above. Indeed, they were not easy to deal with. However, Su Yi did not take it to heart. Relying on the 100 transformation steps, he could sense that the Gale Golden Eagle had not left for the past few days and was still waiting for him. Therefore, if he wanted to leave, there would not be much of a problem. What Su Yi was worried about was that the disciples of the disciplinary hall would still be unwilling to let him go after he left. It would be equally troublesome. "Su Yi, surrender. You won't be able to escape today, no matter what." The extraordinary youth of the disciplinary hall shouted in a deep voice. His aura rippled as the sword in his hand was unsheathed. Buzz! Boom! Instantly, the dozens of disciples of the disciplinary hall moved together. Yuan Qi gushed out from the soles of their feet as their auras erupted. Swords appeared one after another as they were unsheathed, the sound of swords resounding through the air. Dozens of figures surrounded Su Yi. Dozens of long swords were suffused with sword chi and flickered with light as they pointed straight at Su Yi. Dozens of Yuan spirit stage auras gathered together. The momentum was vast and mighty, causing the square to tremble and dust to fly. It was shocking to the soul. Is it going to be a battle? Some disciples were shocked. There were many people from the disciplinary hall, and they did not seem to plan on letting the outer disciple Su Yi go. "I'm afraid this is going to blow up." Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the others who had just breathed a sigh of relief felt their hearts rise to their throats. They originally thought that they would be fine after defeating Sword 11. After all, the Myriad Sword Conference was tomorrow. They never thought that the disciplinary hall would be so persistent. Are we going to do something? Looking at the commotion in the square, someone from the group of deacons asked, "How are we going to do anything? None of these brats from the disciplinary hall are to be trifled with. They won't listen to our words." A middle-aged deacon smiled bitterly. "Looks like you guys don't want to let this go. Then I'll keep you company. Whoever dares to stop me will have to bear the consequences." He was enraged as well. These disciples of the disciplinary hall were really endless. Rumble. As his voice fell, the sound of wind and thunder resounded. A new aura swept out from Suyi's body. At this moment, Yi no longer held back his cultivation at the third level of Yuan's spirit stage. Scarlet light filled the air as a vast and mighty aura spread out. This aura caused one's heart to palpitate, as if it could suppress everything. Oh, Guji! Under this aura, the nearby barbaric demon beasts roared and trembled, prostrating themselves. The barbaric demon beast mounts in the sky whined and trembled, tottering on the verge of collapse. Third level of Yuan's spirit stage. He's only at the third level of Yuan's spirit stage. When the aura on Suyi's body was retained, some of the sharper people present cried out in alarm. Defeating 11th Sword at the fourth level of Yuan's spirit stage with a cultivation at the third level of Yuan's spirit stage. They knew what this meant. How can this aura be so strong? The dozens of disciplinary hall disciples were all jolted awake. The vast aura caused their hearts to palpitate uncontrollably. Under this immense pressure, Yao Weiji could not help but kneel down. "Who dares to stop me?" He opened his mouth, his low roar resounding across the square. He planned to fight and intimidate the disciplinary hall. Otherwise, he would not be able to escape today. Looking at Yi, the dozens of disciplinary hall disciples looked at each other, their sword-wielding hands inexplicably trembling. Especially after witnessing 11th Sword's defeat, none of them dared to make the first move. The aura emanating from the youth before them was simply too terrifying. "How dare you!" Suddenly, a mighty roar rang out. When it landed in the ears of everyone present, it was like thunder, causing their souls to tremble. As the voice fell, a figure appeared in the square, as if out of thin air, landing in front of Yi, who was surrounded by the disciplinary hall disciples. Chapter 389. When such a middle-aged man appeared, Yi's heart trembled for no reason as his gaze wavered. Expert, Origin Emperor Realm Expert. With his powerful soul power, Yi immediately judged that the person in front of him was an Origin Emperor Realm Expert. He was probably not an ordinary Origin Emperor Realm Expert. He looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. His face was deep and handsome. He must have been a handsome man when he was young. However, he was mature and steady, with a kind of imposing temperament. "Greetings, Elder Shangwan." "Greetings, Elder Shangwan." As Yi sized up the man, reverent voices came from all around. The disciples around the square knelt down on one knee one after another. The dozens of disciplinary hall disciples also knelt down on one knee with their swords in hand. Their eyes were filled with reverence. The deacons were also moved as they bowed. They were even more shocked. The person who came was Elder Shangwan, whose identity was rather special. Although he didn't have a sword peak under him, he was in charge of the disciplinary hall. The disciples didn't expect that the disciplinary hall elder would come in person. An elder of Shunjian Gate. Yi wasn't surprised. It turned out to be an elder. No wonder the invisible aura on his body was so strong. Elder Shangwan, who landed on the ground, but his gaze fell on Yi directly. His obsidian-like bright and dazzling black pupils rippled. He wasn't angry, but was imposing as he said, "How dare you? Follow me back to the disciplinary hall." His voice was cold and imposing. It was like thunder in the ears of Yi and all the disciples present. Elder Shangwan of the disciplinary hall has come in person to arrest Yi. The disciples present trembled in their hearts. The dignified disciplinary hall elder was usually elusive. Ordinary disciples might not even see him once a year. Today, he had come in person to arrest an outer sanctum disciple. He's done for. Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the rest turned pale. How could Su Yi resist when the dignified disciplinary hall elder came in person? Carrot. Su Yi's eyes moved as he stared at Elder Shangwan Hu. His thunderous voice buzzed in his ears and shook his soul. A vast and mighty pressure swept over, causing the surrounding space to seem as if it had frozen. However, it wasn't Su Yi's first time facing an Origin Emperor Realm expert, even though the disciplinary hall elder in front of him didn't seem to be an ordinary Origin Emperor Realm expert. Under the invisible pressure, Su Yi secretly took a deep breath. Under the suppression of the invisible pressure, his figure still stood straight. He slightly raised his eyes and bowed in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. He said, "May I ask, Elder, what kind of sect rule have I violated that I need to go to the punishment hall to be punished?" His faint voice was calm as it spread across the square. His voice was very soft, but when it landed in the ears of all the disciples present, it was as if a bomb had exploded in the water, causing a huge wave to rise. "This brat doesn't seem to be afraid of Elder." A disciple secretly raised his eyes as his gaze flickered with astonishment. Hearing Su Yi's words, Elder Shangwan, whose gaze was clearly stunned. His obsidian-like eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He said to Su, "Resisting arrest in front of the disciplinary hall's disciples is enough. May I ask, Elder, if the disciplinary hall's disciples arrest someone for no reason, do I have to surrender without a fight? Or can the disciplinary hall's disciples be lawless in Shenzhen Gate?" Asked Sui, "If the disciplinary hall's disciples arrest someone for no reason, they will naturally give you justice after investigating everything. However, you have openly resisted arrest. This matter is enough for you to go to the disciplinary hall. Follow me back to the disciplinary hall to talk about it." Elder Shangwan, who was stunned once again. Then, his eyes flickered as if he didn't want to say anything more to Su Yi. "Since Elder has come personally, I naturally have no choice but to obey. However, Elder has not investigated the matter clearly before taking action against me. If this matter were to spread out, I'm afraid it wouldn't be good for Elder's reputation." Su Yi secretly gritted his teeth. This was an Origin Emperor expert, a dignified elder of Shenzhen Gate. Even if he was 100 times stronger, it would still be difficult for him to be a match for him. Elder Shangwan, whose gaze was secretly twitching, as if he was very surprised. He naturally understood what Su Yi had said. It was a pun. If he were to take this brat away directly, it would be bad for his reputation if this matter were to spread. However, Elder Shangwan, who knew that he had to take this brat away immediately. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his turn. Although he was in charge of the disciplinary hall, he was the only one who knew that he was usually at a disadvantage in many matters. "You have a sharp tongue. No matter what, follow me back to the new disciplinary hall first." Elder Shangwan, who didn't delay any longer. He was afraid that things would change if he were to delay any longer. He stretched out his hand, and a palm print distorted the void. It was slightly bent and instantly solidified the void. It was about to land on Su Yi's shoulder. At this moment, Su Yi only felt the void around him tremble for no reason. Before the palm print landed, his entire body felt as if it was being crushed by 100,000 mountains. He couldn't move at all and couldn't circulate the Origin Qi in his body. In front of such an expert, Su Yi had no power to resist. Boom! Suddenly, the mysterious ball of light in Su Yi's body suddenly trembled. Light began to spread out in his mind. This brat is right. The disciplinary hall can't just casually arrest people. Suddenly, at this critical moment, a sarcastic voice sounded in the square. A silhouette appeared beside Su Yi without a sound. Su Yi didn't know how he appeared. However, with the appearance of this elder, Su Yi felt that the solidified space around him began to relax. The pressure dissipated into nothing. At the same time, a palm print from the former landed lightly on Elder Shangwan, whose palm print like a bolt of lightning. Qi-la. When the two palm prints collided, there was no expected explosion of energy. There was also no special movement. The surrounding void trembled slightly. Light burst out and spread out. Then, everything returned to normal. The mysterious ball of light in Su Yi's mind, which had just spread out light, quieted down again. Elder Yu, what do you mean? However, the moment the two palm prints subsided, Elder Shangguan, whose voice was heard, the expression on his face changed drastically. Elder Shangguan, as an elder of the disciplinary hall, you actually took action personally for an outer sect disciple. You really did it personally. The faint voice sounded. It had a sense of vicissitudes. The person immediately turned around and looked at Su Yi. Su Yi had already sensed that it was another Origin Emperor expert. He seemed to be an elder of Shunjian Gate. Chapter 390. It's another elder. It's Elder Yu from the 28th Sword Peak. The disciples who were kneeling in the square were even more shocked at this moment. Another elder had come, and it seemed that he had also come for the outer disciple Su Yi. Su Yi alone had actually alarmed two elders to come here. Good boy, you have guts. I like it. Come with me to the 28th Sword Peak. Once you are there, the torture hall won't dare to frame you. Elder Yu Changqing looked at Su Yi, his bright eyes flashing, as if he wanted to see through Su Yi from head to toe, from the outside to the inside. Yu Changqing, do you have any shame? Why should I go to the 28th Sword Peak with you? Do you think the torture hall will dare to casually accuse a disciple of the 19th Sword Peak of some false charges? Another voice sounded, and a figure appeared out of thin air. He looked to be in his 60s, and his long black hair was combed very carefully. His hair was tied into a bun, and there was not a single strand of hair out of place. His silver-like white eyebrows were very eye-catching, and in his slightly sunken eye sockets, a pair of dark brown eyes that were boundlessly deep. The first thing he did was to size Su Yi up. Can I go to the 17th Sword Peak? Looking at the chapter section of the S version, swoosh, swoosh, the sound came from afar, and with the sound of wind breaking, two figures landed on the square almost at the same time. When these two people landed, the surrounding void trembled slightly. It was a man and a woman. The man also looked to be in his 60s or 70s. He had a mustache, long gray hair, and deep brown eyes. The woman was an old woman. Her face was full of vicissitudes of life. Her long hair was no longer young, but mixed with a small part of silver hair. It was half hidden and half hidden, but her face was extremely rosy and lustrous. Elder Liu Bai Mei of the 19th Sword Peak, Elder Mei Huaye of the 17th Sword Peak, and Elder Duan Yuerong of the 9th Sword Peak. Three more elders. Disciple greets all the elders. Disciple greets all the elders. Everyone's eyes were trembling. They were indescribably shocked. Three more elders actually came. What kind of day was it today? Elder Shangguan, whose expression was very ugly. His heart was filled with regret. He should not have delayed for a moment. He should have brought Su Yi away immediately. But now, he was afraid that he was in big trouble. Rise, there's no need to be so courteous. Elder Duan Yurong gently waved her sleeve, indicating for the surrounding disciples to rise. However, her kind face did not delay as it directly landed on Su Yi. Origin Emperors are all elders. At this moment, Yuan Emperors appeared one after another. They were all elders of Shenzhen Gate. This made Su Yi a little dumbfounded. Didn't he only deal with the disciples of the 15th Sword Peak? Why did he attract so many elders? You're called Su Yi, right? Let's go. Follow me to the 17th Sword Peak. I'll protect you, and there's no need to fear the torture chamber. Elder Mei Huaye appeared, glanced around, and then reached out to grab Su Yi. Elder Mei, don't scare this outer disciple. Why should he go to your 17th Sword Peak? Going to my 19th Sword Peak is the right choice. No, Su, you should go to my 28th Sword Peak. Elders, don't forget your status. You can't stop the torture chamber from doing its job. As Elder Mei Huaye made his move, almost at the same time, Yu Changqing, Liu Bai Mei, and several other elders spoke in unison. Then, figures fell towards Su Yi at the same time. The several handprints that were shrouding Su Yi together had no choice but to collide with each other. Whoosh! The light was dazzling, and the void trembled for no reason. Everything happened too fast. Several figures crossed in the middle of the square, and then the void seemed to be chaotic. The bright light was dazzling. However, no energy leaked out. With Su-Yi as the center, the void around him seemed to be about to explode at any time. Su-Yi, who was in the center, also felt an unparalleled pressure at this moment. The surrounding void was about to explode. The energy light in front of him was so dazzling that it was difficult to see anything. But then Su-Yi's body relaxed. A figure appeared, and an invisible force fell around him. Whoosh! The energy that filled the sky dissipated in the surroundings. It dissipated within a radius of a few feet, without any leakage of energy. It seemed that these elders had a tacit understanding when they attacked at the same time. Everything was controlled in the surrounding area, so that it would not affect the large number of onlookers at this moment. Everything was calm, and several elders took a step back. "Are you okay?" A gentle voice fell in Su-Yi's ears. Elder Duan Yuerong's figure appeared in front of Su-Yi, looking at Su-Yi with a touch of kindness. The collision of several Origin Emperor Realm experts had caused Su-Yi's heart to palpitate. Even his soul spirit was throbbing. There didn't seem to be much of a commotion just now, but Su-Yi, who was in the middle of it, was the clearest. The few elders' attacks were within control, but if someone was affected, the consequences would be imaginable. "Greetings, Elder." Su-Yi came back to his senses and looked at the elder in front of him. That kind face reminded Su-Yi of village chief. No need for formalities. Elder Duan Yuerong nodded and said to Su-Yi, "Elder Duan, this lad is wanted by the disciplinary hall. I have to bring him back to the disciplinary hall." Seeing this, Elder Shangwan, who seemed to be afraid that Elder Duan Yuerong would beat him to it. "So what if it's the disciplinary hall?" "Elder Shangwan, everyone knows what you're really thinking. Why are you playing dumb?" Elder Liu Baimei rolled his eyes at Elder Shangwan Hu and said snappily. He then looked at Su-Yi. His silver eyebrows were very eye-catching, and his deep brown eyes seemed to be trying hard to squeeze out a smile. He said, "Su-Yi, follow me to the 19th Sword Peak. What do you think?" Elder Su-Yi was stunned. Since the beginning until now, he was rather puzzled about why Elder Liu wanted him to go to the 19th Sword Peak. "Liu Baimei, what's so good about going to the 19th Sword Peak? What a joke." Elder Yu Changqing interrupted Su-Yi with a smile on his old face. However, this smile seemed a little forced and awkward. He might as well not smile, and said to Su-Yi, "Su-Yi, follow me to the 28th Sword Peak. That's the right choice for you." "Elders, you've gone too far. Don't forget that you're the elders of Shenzhen Gate. I'm taking this lad to the disciplinary hall as an elder of the disciplinary hall. If you dare to stop me, don't blame me for reporting to the gate master." Chapter 391. Shangwan Hu, don't use the name of the torture hall to scare me. Do you think we don't know why you want to take this brat away? Elder Mei Huaya said in a deep voice. His mustache twitched along with his lips. His brown eyes were deep in his eye sockets as he stared at Elder Shangwan Hu. "Why don't we just go see the sect leader?" Elder Duan Yuerong said. "Whether or not this disciple is guilty, and whether or not he should be sent to the torture chamber, we'll let the sect leader decide. If I want to see the sect leader, then so be it. Let the sect leader decide." Elder Shangwan Hu's eyes moved. His obsidian-like sharp eyes seemed to be moving as well, as if he was planning something in his heart. "All right, let's go see the sect leader." The three elders, Yu Changqing, Liu Baimei, and Mei Huaya, nodded. It seemed that each of them had their own ideas. Their deep, bright eyes were twinkling, as if they were scheming something in their minds. "Su-Yi, come with me to see the sect master. When the time comes, if the sect master wants to convict you of a crime, just say that you have already entered my tutelage and are my personal disciple. I will bear all the responsibility for you." Suddenly, Elder Duan Yuerong's voice was transmitted directly into Su-Yi's ears. It seemed to be a transmission that only Su-Yi could hear. Su-Yi was taken aback. He was secretly surprised. He did not expect Elder Duan Yuerong to want to take him as a disciple. Su-yi, if the sect leader decides to convict you, just say that you have already entered the 28th Sword Peak, and I will accept you as my personal disciple. Su-yi, take me as your master. Come to my 17th Sword Peak and become my personal disciple. I spent a lot of effort to obtain a Dao artifact level sword a few days ago. As long as you become my disciple, this Dao artifact level sword will be yours in the future. Su-yi, take me as your teacher and go to the 19th Sword Peak to become my personal disciple. The headmaster will not blame you when the time comes. I just happened to get a profound truth pellet a while ago. After you take it, you will have a good foundation for the Yuanjin stage. When the time comes, you will be able to defeat all your opponents in the Yuanjin stage. Little brat Su-yi, when the time comes, just say that you want to become my disciple in front of the sect leader and become my direct disciple. In the future, the Divine Sword Sect's punishment hall will be handed over to you sooner or later. In the future, with me in the Divine Sword Sect, I will lend you a hand in your cultivation. Just as Su-yi was secretly surprised, several elders at the scene transmitted similar messages to Su-yi almost at the same time. Let's go. Elder Duan Yuerong's voice sounded in Su-yi's ears. Then, a palm gently landed on Su-yi's shoulder. Su-yi's body involuntarily rose into the air, and the sound of air rushing into his ears could be heard. The air in the air whistled, and in the next moment, Su-yi felt that he was already in midair. But at this moment, the shock in Su-yi's heart was undoubtedly greater. These elders did not seem to be here to make things difficult for him. Each and every one of them seemed to want to take him in, especially the private messages from the elders. Su-yi was completely dumbfounded. They actually took out Dao artifacts, profound truth pellets, and even the torture chamber as a temptation. Dao artifacts. Although Su-yi was not a weapon refiner, he was very clear about them. If Yuan weapons, profound weapons, and spiritual weapons were compared to Dao artifacts, the difference was simply like heaven and earth. A high-grade spiritual weapon was already priceless. Dao artifacts, to ordinary people, existed in legends. It was said that Dao artifacts had already developed spiritual intelligence in the weapons. Once a treasure of this level was used, it could sweep away all directions, move mountains and overturn seas, and cut the void into pieces. Profound truth pellets, although Su-yi had not seen them before. From everything that the mysterious person in his mind had passed on, he was very clear that although the profound truth pellets were only high-grade star-grade elixirs, their true level was comparable to low-grade yellow-grade elixirs. For those who needed them, even low-grade yellow-grade elixirs would not be exchanged for the profound truth pellets. The profound truth pellets prescription was said to be a secret. There were very few weapon refiners who knew the prescription of the profound truth pellets, and this was because of the special effects of the profound truth pellets. It was said that the profound truth pellets could allow a cultivator to obtain endless benefits when breaking through to the Yuanjin stage. This kind of benefit in one's own cultivation was even more irresistible to any cultivator. In the torture chamber, in the future, the torture chamber would be handed over to him. Su-yi was even more shocked. Elder Shangwan, who the torture chamber, was aggressive and sharp. It turned out that he also wanted to take him as a disciple. And this temptation was even more extraordinary. It was no doubt that in the future, he would also be a dignified elder of Shenjian Gate. This was not an ordinary elder who was in charge of the torture chamber. In Shenjian Gate, his position could be imagined. What the hell is going on? The air around him whistled, and the sound in his ears made Su-yi's eyes move. It was difficult for him to come back to his senses. He was thinking about the purpose of these elders, but he could not understand. The mountains were continuous, and the mountain ranges were undulating. In the courtyard and pavilion, smoke rose from the incense burner. The 11th sword was defeated. In the small hall, a gray-robed old man of about 50 years old looked shocked and said to Sita Luyun, who was sitting against the wall. The 11th sword was also defeated. Hearing this, Sita Luyun's eyes suddenly fluctuated. He stood up, and a black robe embroidered with golden silk patterns outlined his strong physique. He unconsciously revealed a natural domineering aura of a superior. He asked, "Did you see it with your own eyes?" "I saw it with my own eyes." The gray-robed old man nodded with certainty. He stood in the distance and saw everything with his own eyes. He guessed that he was even more shocked. The boy called Su, he seemed to be much more powerful than the rumors among the Xinjiang Gate disciples said. "It's getting more and more surprising." Situyun's deep eyes flashed, and he muttered softly, "Su Yi, the 36 Sword Peak, Elder Yu, Elder Mei, Elder Lu, Elder Duan, Elder Shangwan Hu, and the others are about to fight. They should be on their way here now, saying that they want to find the sect leader to make a decision." The gray-robed old man smiled bitterly. He hurried here to let the sect leader know what was going on. "Interesting. I'm also very curious about this boy." Situ Luyun smiled slightly, and there was light flowing in his eyes. The continuous mountain range converged into a large mountain. It was majestic and majestic. The mountain was covered with green, and it hid the exquisite buildings. Looking down at the mountains from above, there were thousands of mountains and valleys overlapping each other. The undulating waves of green were majestic and spectacular. The 72 tallest and most majestic mountain peaks towered with the momentum to uproot the earth and reach the sky. One of the mountain peaks was even more majestic and magnificent, as if it was holding up the sun. It stood majestically among the mountain peaks, and its momentum was like a dragon raising its head. Its momentum was extraordinary. Chapter 392. There was a thick layer of mottled bluestone on the plaza. A gigantic stone tortoise was as tall as two people. It was holding a gigantic stone sword that seemed to pierce through the sea of clouds. There were several stone pillars around the plaza. They were carved with several ancient beast-shaped images, adding an ancient aura to the plaza. There was a majestic palace in front of them. Above the gate, there were 3 ancient words, Xinjiang Gate, written in flamboyant calligraphy. These 3 words also carried a kind of pressure, causing people to tremble in their hearts when they looked at them for an extra second. On both sides of the gate, there was a pair of ferocious stone beasts that were baring their fangs. There were several zhang tall and made one feel awe. He looked around curiously. This place was definitely not ordinary. When he landed here, there was clearly no aura fluctuation, but it made his heart tremble for no reason. Even his soul was affected. This place is not simple. Perhaps there is some terrifying method set up here. Su Yi's perception as a soul controller told him that this mountain was definitely not simple. It gave him a feeling that it could suppress all living things. Around this mountain, the energy of heaven and earth was obviously the densest. There seemed to be many herbs that had reached the level of spirit herbs growing at the foot of the mountain. This was a treasure ground. Greetings, elders. In front of the palace gate, there were several figures in armor. When they saw Elder Yu Chongqing, Shangwan Hu, and the others, they immediately stepped forward and bowed. He sized them up. These armored figures were all in their 30s, but their auras were extremely powerful. If they were in the outside world, any one of them would be an expert. This should be the main peak of the 72 sword peaks. Sui guessed. Looking at this mountain, it should be the main peak of the 72 Xinjiang Gate peaks. It was said that the main peak of Xinjiang Gate was also known as Sky Sword Peak. Normally, only disciples and elders with the qualifications could step in when the sect master called for a meeting. Is the sect master here? Elder Yu Chongqing waved his sleeves and asked the armored disciple. Elder Yu, the sect master and right protector are already waiting. The person nodded and glanced at Su Yi curiously. It seemed a little special that a few elders had brought an outer sect disciple to the Sky Sword Peak. Kid, go see the sect master. Elder Shangwan Hu opened his mouth when he heard this. His obsidian-like eyes stared at Su Yi without leaving a trace. He raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was reminding Su Yi, especially when he saw that Su Yi seemed to be so shocked that he couldn't recover from his shock. Elder Shangwan Hu felt very happy and wanted to praise himself. Elder Shangwan Hu was secretly delighted. Did you, Chongqing, Mei Huaye, and Duan Yuerong think that it would be useful just because they wanted to see the sect leader? With his promise of a future position as an elder of the legal chamber, how could this kid not be tempted? If he could take this kid in as his disciple, then he would be able to hold his head high during this myriad sword conference. Sect Master, please make the decision. Yes, let the sect leader make the decision. Let the sect leader make the decision. Elder Yu Chongqing, Elder Mei Huaye, and Elder Liu Baimei spoke, but at this moment, they all looked at Su Yi with deep meaning and gave Su Yi a special look without leaving a trace. At this moment, these elders all had their own little plans in their hearts. Looking at Su Yi's shocked expression, the elders were secretly delighted. It seemed that their promise was absolutely useful. They didn't believe that this kid wouldn't be tempted by such a promise. If they took such a good seedling in as their disciple, not to mention the Myriad Sword Conference, they would at least be able to hold their heads high. In the future, they would also be able to maintain their position in the various sword peaks of Xinjiang Gate. The elders had originally heard about the strength of this outer sect disciple and were already tempted. But today they had been secretly spying. After seeing Sword 11's defeat with their own eyes, they were even more shocked. With the eyesight of these elders, how could they not see that this outer sect disciple had even held back when he defeated Sword 11? At the Myriad Sword Conference, if this kid really used his full strength, he might be able to kill his way into the top 10. This made the elders really want to take him in as their disciple. Such a talented young disciple. How could they not be tempted? At their age and status, who would want to take in a few talented disciples with a bright future? Regarding the elders' secret signal, Su Yi could only smile bitterly in secret. To be honest, the elders' promise was really tempting to Su Yi, and the temptation was not ordinary. Xuanjin Pill, Dao Artifact, any one of them was a precious treasure. The use of Xuanjin Pill was self-evident. Dao Artifact, that could no longer be described as priceless. The identity of the future Torture Hall Elder, with the full support of the current Torture Hall Elder, was equivalent to a future powerhouse. Look at the original chapter *4 IP on section G. The identity of the Xinjiang Gate's Torture Hall Elder, if it was in the outside world, would definitely be enough to make all the authorities show some respect. With such a temptation, Su Yi also knew that any young disciple of the Xinjiang Gate would find it hard to resist. The temptation was huge, but very quickly, Su Yi had already calmed down. Su Yi knew very well that this was not what he wanted. Even if he had everything that the three elders had given him, it would still be difficult for him to set foot on the sacred mountain. Xinjiang Gate was a first-rate power, a colossus, a large sect. But the sacred mountain was even more powerful. It was one of the strongest powers in the 6 continents and 3 continents. If he accepted this, he would probably not be able to set foot on the sacred mountain. Su Yi secretly took a deep breath as the corner of his mouth curled up into a smile. The reason why he stayed in the Divine Sword sect was to personally thank Elder Su. While the elders were thinking, Su Yi walked into the palace in front. The palace was vast and could probably hold thousands of people. Several huge golden silkwood trees were engraved with many rare beasts and sword patterns. The carvings were exquisite and lifelike. Many huge bright moon pearls hung on the ceiling of the palace, shining brightly, as if the moon had fallen. The floor was paved with green jade, mottled with traces. The interior of the palace was richly decorated, and the atmosphere was solemn. On both sides of the palace, there were large chairs with backs neatly arranged. The atmosphere was extremely solemn. Above the head, there was an ancient green stone chair that was at least 5 feet wide. 2 huge swords hung in a cross, and when the wind blew, the sword tassels swayed slightly, adding a sharp and majestic aura. Suddenly, Su Yi felt a tremor in front of his eyes. It was as if there were 2 vigorous sword chi piercing through the air, causing his soul to palpitate. For no reason, the yuan chi in his body was affected, as if he was unable to circulate it. Chapter 393. Looking at that kind of gaze, It was as if the sword chi was oppressive, crushing the soul, as if to see through him from the outside. He couldn't help but secretly palpitate in his heart. The former's body revealed a natural domineering aura, quietly making him feel great pressure, as if to make him surrender. Asterisk S asterisk P asterisk hashtag however, Su-yi was no longer the same as before. Under the influence of the mysterious ball of light and the origin supreme technique he cultivated, his body gradually developed a majestic and destructive pressure. That majestic and destructive pressure, perhaps because of the origin supreme technique, had even completely integrated with Su-yi, integrating into the cells and bone marrow of his whole body. This kind of pressure was not to be provoked, and it could even become stronger when facing a strong opponent. In the face of such pressure, Su-yi's body, from the inside to the outside, there was a majestic and destructive pressure quietly surging out, without leaving a trace, allowing Su-yi to face it calmly. Is this the head of the Xinjiang Gate? Su-yi guessed that the man who was able to sit in the middle of the hall and had such an incorporeal domineering aura should be the head of the Divine Sword sect. He was a person who was famous in the entire central region and was able to cause a storm. Immediately, Su-yi also saw a gray-robed old man next to him. He looked kind, but his eyes were bright, revealing a sense of shrewdness. The gray-robed old man's invisible aura also made Su-yi feel that he was strong. Although he was not as strong as the several elders, he was definitely not much weaker. At this moment, there was no one else in the hall, so he should be the right protector mentioned by the disciples outside. Greetings to the head. Following the several elders into the hall, he saluted Situ Luyun, but his face was a lot more solemn. Greetings to the head. Su-yi secretly took a breath. This middle-aged man was indeed the head of the Xinjiang Gate, Situ Luyun. He immediately bowed along with the several elders, neither servile nor overbearing. However, this was the head of the Xinjiang Gate, and he himself was not a real disciple of the Xinjiang Gate. So Su-yi did not plan on saluting. Elders, why have you come? Quickly sit. I want to discuss the Myriad Sword Conference with you all. Situ Luyun pretended not to know anything, his eyes faintly smiling. His gaze moved from Yu Chongqing, Shangguan Hu, and the other elders to Su-yi and asked, Outer Sect disciple, why have you come here? Head, this disciple was originally an Outer Sect disciple of the 36th Sword Peak. I don't know why, but a dignified torture chamber elder personally came to arrest him. I don't know what kind of sect rules he has broken. I saw this and felt bad, so I came forward to stop him. I asked the head to make a decision. Looking at Situ Luyun, Elder Yu Chongqing secretly raised his eyes and said, A torture chamber elder actually made a move against an Outer Sect disciple. I don't know what the torture chamber has become these years. Elder Liu Baimei said, his voice faintly hinting at something. How big of a mistake can an Outer Sect disciple make that a dignified torture chamber disciple personally come to arrest him? If this spreads out, our Xinjiang Gate will lose face. Elder Mei Huaye said, his tone extremely impolite. Elder Duan Yuerong did not say anything, but her eyes carried a smile, indicating that Su-yi did not need to be nervous. Humph! Elder Shangguan, whose throat issued a faint cold snort. How could he not understand the purpose of these elders? Did they think that this would be enough to take this disciple into the sect? He had already made arrangements, and the one who had the last laugh would be the winner. Outer Sect disciple of the 36th Sword Peak, what's your name? Situ Luyun's gaze had been sizing up Su-yi. His gaze was calm and did not leave any trace, but his heart had already been stirred. He knew who this Outer Sect disciple in front of him was. It was not difficult for him to defeat the 11th sword. He estimated that he was only 15 or 16 years old. With such strength and cultivation, the current strongest among the younger generation of Xinjiang Gate, such as Ryugan River, Gongqi, and Yinling Feng, were far inferior to this strength when they were at this age. What caused Situ Luyun to be even more shocked in his heart was Su-yi's neither servile nor overbearing bearing at this moment. He was carefree and composed, and it actually faintly gave him an extremely special feeling. Disciple Su-yi, Su Yi bowed again and replied to Sito Luyun, but his heart was incomparably nervous at this moment. Although Su Yi himself was used to facing this kind of pressure, but at this moment, the various auras in the hall still made him feel a little breathless. He also hoped that the mysterious, beautiful woman did not deceive him. If he caused any big trouble, he would be able to smoothly escape. You are Su Yi. I have already heard that you seriously injured a few disciples of the 15th Sword Peak. You did not go easy on them. You made a move in the Sword Hall, flouting the rules of the sect. You even stripped a few disciples naked and tied them to the 36th Sword Peak. You stole the space bags of your fellow disciples. You are indeed daring to resist arrest in front of the Punishment Hall's disciples. Sito Luyun looked at Su Yi. His voice was loud and clear, but his gaze was always on Su Yi, as if he wanted to carefully see through everything about Su Yi. Hearing Sito Luyun's words, Yu Chongqing, Mei Huaya, and the other elders secretly frowned, thinking about something. Speaking of which, Su Yi, this brat, was really daring. Everything he did, there seemed to be no disciple in the Shunjian Gate who dared to do so. At least they had never seen it in the Shunjian Gate, but the guy in front of them had done it. Especially stripping a large group of inner court disciples, including direct disciples, tying them up in public, and stealing their space bags. This kind of precedent was absolutely unprecedented in the entire Shunjian Gate. Reporting to sect leader, disciple is innocent. Hearing Sito Luyun's words, Su Yi's expression did not change, and he raised his eyes and replied, Is that so? Then tell me, what are you innocent about? I heard that there are a few disciples from the 15th Sword Peak called Teng Ming and Wang Qi, but they were heavily injured by you, and I'm afraid they'll be crippled in the future. The right protector at the side wore a simple gray robe, and his gaze looked at Su Yi with a faint fluctuation of light. Those disciples from the 15th Sword Peak went up to the 36th Sword Peak to steal our medicinal pills, and they bullied us first. They were also the ones who made the first move. Left protector, you'll know once you investigate. Su Yi bowed to the right protector with a calm expression. Hearing this, the right protector's eyes shone brightly, and his brows slightly raised. He already knew about this matter, and the protector elders were very clear about some things between the disciples of the sect, but they had always turned a blind eye to it. This also helped to encourage and motivate the disciples, as long as they didn't cause too much of a commotion. Not to mention that Teng Ming and the others were injured on the 36th Sword Peak, so there was no need to investigate at all. If it really came down to it, this kid really did not do anything wrong. It was purely self-defense. The Sword Hall made a move. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, it was still a violation of the sect rules, said the right protector. Chapter 394. If you don't think you're in the right, why did you resist the disciplinary hall's pursuit? The right protector said to Su Yi. The disciplinary hall's disciples clearly saw Hua Dongxiu and the others from the 15th Sword Peak attacking me first, but they turned a blind eye to it. I was forced to defend myself, and only jumped out to stop them after I was surrounded by dangers. I didn't arrest Hua Dongxiu and the others either. They were clearly bullying the disciples of the 36th Sword Peak, and were clearly in cahoots with Hua Dongxiu and the others. How could I just let myself be captured without a fight? If I had let myself be captured without a fight, I don't know what would have happened at this moment. Left protector and sect leader, please understand. Su Yi looked as if he had been wronged and could almost squeeze out tears. However, when they heard Su Yi's words, the elders and Sito Luyun present couldn't help but be stunned. According to the situation they had received, was this really the case? But when they thought about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. However, when they heard Su Yi say that he was forced to defend himself and that he was surrounded by dangers, how could this kid say that? With this kid's strength that defeated the 11th sword, if he didn't want to fight, then how could Hua Dongxiu and the others catch up to him? The right protector was also stunned and a little speechless. After a few breaths, he looked straight at Su Yi and asked, Then you stripped a group of disciples in public and damaged the reputation of Shunjian Gate. You stole the space bags of your fellow disciples. You have no excuse for your audacity, right? Right, Protector, you misunderstood. Ba Yi and the other disciples went to the 36th Sword Peak to cause trouble. But in the end, they were defeated and injured. I saw that their injuries were too serious, and their clothes were stained with blood and bruises. So I helped them settle down and waited for their fellow disciples to come to their aid. As for the space bags, they were injured and dizzy. If they lost their space bags, they would be very anxious, so I helped them take care of them. Since the Right Protector asked about this, then I'll have to trouble you to return the space bags to them when the time comes. As soon as he finished speaking, Su-yi immediately took out a large number of space bags and respectfully took a few steps forward and handed them to the Right Protector. Can you do this? Looking at Su-yi, everyone present was dumbfounded, including Sita Luyun and the Right Protector. Could this brat be any more shameless? Elder Yu Chongqing, Elder Lu Bai-mei, and the others were dumbfounded. Originally, they were still thinking about how they could help this kid get out of this predicament. Who would have thought that this kid's mouth was really nimble enough? Looking at the pile of space bags that Su-yi handed to him, the corner of the Right Guardian's eyes twitched violently for some reason. He did not know whether to accept it or not. Look at T-on Section D of the 8th edition, a chapter. After taking one last look at Su-yi, the Right Guardian accepted the interspatial bag. Su-yi lowered his head, and the corner of his mouth curled up into a smile. After handing over the interspatial bag to the Right Protector, it had nothing to do with him in the future. It had nothing to do with him anymore. Kid, no matter what you say, there's no way you can get away with your audacity. You won't be able to get away with it if you have a sharp tongue. The Right Protector took the spatial bag from Su-yi's hand and glared at him. This matter will naturally be investigated in the end. Your sharp tongue will not pass the test. Sita Luyun spoke. She shifted her gaze away from Su-yi and looked at the other elders. Finally, her gaze landed on Elder Shangwan, who, as she smiled faintly, she asked, "This matter should be handed over to the disciplinary hall. What does Elder Shangwan think? Do you have a way to deal with it?" Sect Master, you can't. Although Su-yi has made mistakes, it is only a small one. He is still young. Handing him over to the disciplinary hall is too heavy a punishment. Elder Yu Chongqing's expression changed, and he immediately spoke. He absolutely could not allow Su-yi to fall into Shangwan Hu's hands. That's right. Although Su-yi has made mistakes, he was only forced to make a move. Sect Master, please deal with him leniently. Elder Lu Bai-mei also pleaded for leniency. Intentionally or unintentionally, he glanced at Su-yi. Sect Master, although Su-yi has made mistakes, they are indeed small ones. Tomorrow is the Myriad Sword Assembly. This child's talent is not bad. I hope that the net can be lenient and deal with him leniently. Elder Lu Bai-mei also pleaded for leniency for Su-yi. Intentionally or unintentionally, he also glanced at Su-yi. I didn't think that all the elders would plead for leniency for this outer sect disciple. It seems this outer sect disciple must have some outstanding aspects. Sita Luyun looked at the elders and pretended to be surprised. She smiled and then looked at Elder Shangwan Hu and asked, "Elder Shangwan, do you think this disciple should be dealt with leniently?" Dealt with? Why should we deal with him? Elder Shangwan Hu finally spoke. Looking at Sita Luyun and the elders present, he seemed to be at a loss. Seeing Shangwan Hu's expression, the elders were also stunned. Shangwan Hu, then why did you want to capture Su-yi? Elder Lu Bai-mei said unhappily. He slightly raised his eyebrows, and his eye-catching white eyebrows twitched, revealing a bit of humor. I've already investigated. Although Su-yi has made mistakes, he did not take the initiative to make a move. The one who started the trouble was also not Su-yi, so his punishment is light. As for stealing a fellow disciple's space bag, it seems that was just a rumor. Therefore, even according to the sect's rules, Su-yi will only be confined for 7 days at most. Elder Shangwan, who looked at the elders present, and said indifferently. His gaze secretly revealed a confident smile to Su-yi, as if telling Su-yi that he was here for him. This, hearing Elder Shangwan Hu's words, Yu Chongqing, Lu Bai-mei, Mei Huaya, and the other elders' faces were all trembling. This Shangwan, who was definitely not like this at the beginning. He was simply changing at will. Sect Master, I've already investigated. Su Yi is an outer disciple of the 36th Sword Peak. His talent is not bad. If he can be guided and taught a little, I'm afraid that in the future, he will be enough to become the backbone of our Shunjin Gate. He can become a pillar of our Shunjin Gate. Therefore, I personally want to find Su Yi to accept Su Yi as a personal disciple. Elder Shangwan, who knew the astonished expressions on the faces of the elders present, and there was a hint of satisfaction in his heart. These guys wanted to snatch someone from him, but they were still too inexperienced. Before Elder Shangwan, whose voice fell, the expressions of the elders had changed greatly. These elders were not surprised that Elder Shangwan, who actually wanted to accept Su Yi as a disciple. They already knew this in their hearts. Otherwise, why would an elder of the torture hall, with Shangwan whose status, personally make things difficult for an outer disciple? He was just using a pretense to take away Su Yi. The elders were surprised by Shangwan, whose sudden change. This guy was waiting here, and he actually wanted to speak first in front of the sect master. Situ Liuyun's gaze was rather calm, as if she already knew everything. Chapter 395. At this moment, in Elder Shangwan Hu's mind, everything was just a formality. If he accepted Su Yi as his disciple in front of the sect leader, even if Elder Su came back and blamed him, he could also get the sect leader to deal with it together. It was killing two birds with one stone. As for Su Yi, Elder Shangwan, who had confidence in him, among all the disciples of Shunjin Gate, how could anyone refuse the temptation of his conditions? He was afraid that this boy would not be obedient and worship him as his disciple. Shangwan Hu, what do you mean? Do you want to steal my disciple? I also want Su Yi as my disciple. Elder Liu Baimei snorted. Before Su Yi could reply, he had already stared at Su Yi and said, Su Yi, how about worshipping me as your disciple? Haha, if Su Yi worshipped you as his disciple, I'm afraid he would ruin his talent. Elder Mei Huaye sneered, his mustache fluttering. His brown eyes stared at Shangwan, Hu, Liu Baimei, and the other elders, and his disheveled gray hair swayed. Then he looked at Su Yi with a meaningful smile and said, Su Yi, join my sect. I will guide you with all my heart, unlike them who only know how to talk. What a joke! Won't he ruin his talent if he joins your sect? Elder Yu Changqing indifferently rolled his eyes at Elder Mei Huaye, and then came forward. He looked at Su Yi with a smile and said, Come to my 28th Sword Peak and worship me as your disciple. It's definitely much better than worshiping them. Several elders opened their mouths, and their eyes were full of confidence. At this moment, these elders all believed that their promises would certainly tempt Su Yi. It would be a piece of cake to let Su Yi become their disciple. Su Yi, I also hope that you can join my sect. With your talent, I will do my best to help you cultivate. Elder Duan Yurong also spoke up. There was a hint of panic on her benevolent face. It seemed like these elders were determined to take Su Yi as their disciple. He was a disciple who could rank in the top 10 of the Sword Pagoda. His talent was rarely seen in the Heavenly Sword Sect in several hundred years. Naturally, they all wanted to fight for him. Of course, it's to join my sect. Why? I'm the first one to reach the Divine Sword Cliff. Don't you have enough disciples on each Sword Peak? Bullshit. Su Yi must become my disciple. If you're not convinced, then let's have a fight. Let's have a contest then. Who's afraid of whom? Su Yi must join my 17th Sword Peak. Let's just fight. Whoever wins will become my disciple. In an instant, the few elders were already quarreling, showing signs of rolling up their sleeves and going all out, not giving way to each other. The Right Guardian was speechless that the elders were trying to rope in an outer disciple. However, how could the Right Protector not know that a disciple like that could even defeat the 11th sword? Most likely, after the news spread, the other elders in the Divine Sword School might be on their way as well. Situ Liuyun's gaze didn't fluctuate much. She just kept sizing up Su Yi. There was a glint in her eyes, as though she was thinking about something. Elders, please calm down. with your status. Don't lose your dignity in front of this disciple. Looking at the 5 elders who were quarreling in the hall, Sita Luyun felt very helpless. Why don't we let the sect leader make a decision on this matter? Duan Yuerong said to Sita Luyun. She looked at Sita Luyun and said faintly, I still remember when the Sword Peaks were recruiting disciples 5 years ago. The sect leader said that the next time, the 9th Sword Peak would choose first. I don't need to keep it for the next time. I'll choose Sui. This, Sita Luyun smiled helplessly. There was indeed such a thing. Last time, when the various Sword Peaks were accepting disciples, because Yun Lingfeng and a few other disciples could not agree on who would belong to them, they finally agreed to let Elder Duan pick first the next time they accepted disciples. No, the next time is the next time. You can't do this. Elder Mei Huaya immediately objected. I don't agree either. The next time is the next time. This time doesn't count. We'll talk about the next time. This time is special. No. Yu Changqing, Lu Bai Mei, and Shang Wan who were also protesting. They had already arranged everything. Naturally, they couldn't let Elder Duan Yuerong snatch it away. Su Yi was helpless. Everything was a little confusing. He didn't know why, but there were actually a few elders who wanted to take him as a disciple. They even promised great treasures and cultivation resources. Wasn't it generally said that it was extremely difficult to become a disciple of these elders? Could it be that the world had changed? Was it so difficult for these elders to take in a disciple now? If these elders knew what Su Yi was thinking at this moment, they would probably be speechless. How could it be difficult for them to take in a disciple? If they wanted to take in a personal disciple, there would probably be enough people to line up from the Shunjian gate to tens of miles away. What kind of status was it to be a personal disciple of an elder of the Shunjian gate? It also meant that one would be able to become an expert in the future. It was even more difficult to be taken in as a personal disciple by these elders. Without sufficient talent, it was impossible to enter the eyes of these elders. However, Su Yi didn't know how amazing his talent was. At the age of 15 or 16, his cultivation was at the 3rd level of Essence Spirit Realm. He even defeated Sword 11, who was at the 4th level of Essence Spirit Realm. Such talent couldn't escape the sharp eyes of these elders. Moreover, the Myriad Sword Conference was right in front of him. With such strength, if he entered the Myriad Sword Conference, there was definitely hope for him to enter the top 10. Even if it was a conservative estimate, defeating Sword 11 would already push him into the top 15. Moreover, these elders had witnessed with their own eyes that Su Yi defeated Sword 11 without even using his full strength. In addition, Su Yi was still so young. Once he was properly taught and nurtured, his future would be limitless. No one could say for sure how far he could go in the end. Who would want to miss such a disciple with discerning eyes? This, Chapter 4S, Section M of the original version F. Sita Luyun was helpless as she looked at the elders who were arguing. She looked at Su Yi and secretly asked, Su Yi, these elders have always been highly respected in the Xinjiang Gate. To be able to become the disciple of any one of these elders would be a great fortune for you. What do you think? Do you have any intention of becoming a disciple of any of these elders? Hearing Sita Luyun's words, Yu Changqing, Lu Bai Mei, Shang Wanhu, and the other elders' gazes all fell on Su Yi, their eyes hinting at each other. At this moment, although these elders had a mysterious confidence in their hearts, they were still a little nervous. They really didn't want to miss out on such a disciple. Chapter 396. For no reason, at this moment, the air in the entire hall seemed to have solidified. Under the gazes of several elders, Su Yi bowed respectfully to each of the elders present. At this moment, Su Yi's heart was filled with respect for these elders, even for Elder Shang Wanhu. Su Yi could see that Elder Shang Wanhu, who seemed dignified, fierce, and emotionless, actually wanted to take him in as a disciple by all means possible. Seeing Su Yi bow, the elders present, Sita Luyun, and the Right Protector's eyes moved slightly. Many thank for the elders' favor. I am flattered. However, I have no intention of becoming a disciple at the moment. Please forgive me. Many thanks. After the bow, Su Yi spoke. He had already made a decision in his heart. He had no intention of staying in Shinjin Gate. He could only let down the elder's favor. You don't intend to become a disciple. When Su Yi's voice fell, the elders, who were originally confident, were immediately stunned. They did not expect that an outer sect disciple would reject their secret promise. Sita Liyun and the Right Protector were also secretly surprised. The elders cared so much and fought so hard to take this person in as a personal disciple. This was something that many disciples in Shunjian Gate wished for. However, Su Yi had actually cleanly rejected it. Sita Liyun's gaze moved slightly. There was a flicker in his eyes as he looked at Su Yi and said, "Su Yi, I also intend to take you in as a personal disciple. Are you interested?" What? Numerous gazes immediately landed on Sita Liyun's body. The faces of the few elders and the Right Protector were all dumbfounded. How can it be like this? The Gate Master actually wants to take in a disciple. Is he going to kick him in? The elders were stunned. Weren't they here to let the Gate Master make a decision? Why was the Gate Master kicking him in now? The Right Protector was also very surprised. He did not know that the Gate Master wanted to take in a disciple. Su Yi was also stunned. This was the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate. If he stomped his feet, he would be able to shake the entire Zhongzhou. To become the personal disciple of the Gate Master, what kind of status was this? No disciple of Xinjiang Gate could refuse such a temptation. Not to mention the entire Xinjiang Gate. Even in the entire Zhongzhou, or even in the 6 continents, 3 continents, and 1 sea, there were not many people who could refuse such a temptation. If this kind of opportunity fell on other people, they would definitely not hesitate to become a disciple. It would be false to say that Su Yi was not tempted. If it were in the past, Su Yi would definitely not hesitate to become a personal disciple of the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate. From then on, there would be a lot of obstacles on his path of cultivation. He would become an expert, and perhaps marry a daughter of a large sect. Reaching the peak of life was just around the corner. It would not be too difficult. Su Yi's eyes flickered. He had never had a master to guide him. He had always relied on himself to hone his skills. Although he had the primordial chaos supreme technique and the mysterious space, as well as the heavenly Fey ancient scripture on him, the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate wanted to take him in as a disciple. This was definitely a great opportunity for Su Yi. If he had the guidance of an expert like the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate, it would be enough to make up for many of Su Yi's shortcomings. However, Su Yi knew what he wanted. Elder Su was not related to him, but he had saved him in Xinjiang Gate, healed him, and instructed Su Jiahui and the others to take care of him. Even if he took a step back and wanted to become a disciple of the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate, he had to thank Elder Su for saving his life. He had to inform Elder Su before he could become a disciple. "Thank you for your kindness, Gate Master. I still have to go to the 36 Sword Peaks. This matter still requires Elder Su's approval." Su Yi also felt a little regretful. Such an opportunity and good fortune was not fated with him. This guy, is he going to reject the Gate Master? Su Yi's words stunned all the elders present, and they looked at each other. The Gate Master had personally accepted him as a disciple. Who in the entire Xinjiang Gate could refuse? What kind of good fortune and opportunity was this? But this young man actually refused. Not to mention this huge good fortune and opportunity, it could also be said that he did not even give face to the Gate Master. Sita Liyun was very aggrieved at the moment. No matter what, he was the Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate. If he wanted to accept a disciple, not to mention the entire Xinjiang Gate, even the entire Zhongzhou, the 6 continents, and the 3 continents would have to line up. But now that he had taken the initiative to speak, this young man seemed to refuse without thinking too much. "You are only an outer disciple of the 36 Sword Peak. If you become my disciple, it will be the same to tell Elder Su later. Elder Su will definitely not blame you." Sita Liyun looked at Su Yi. If he was really rejected in front of the elders, he would not be able to get out of this embarrassing situation. The dignified Gate Master of Xinjiang Gate had said this. Su Yi was not stupid. At least he was still in Xinjiang Gate. He could not refuse the dignified gate master of Shenzhen Gate. Even if he was not in Shenzhen Gate in the future, it was better not to offend the dignified gate master of Shenzhen Gate. But even if he wanted to be apprenticed, Elder Su had saved him in Shenzhen Gate. He had to tell Elder Su first. Gate master, it's not that I don't want to be apprenticed. To tell you the truth, I have already been apprenticed to Elder Su. Therefore, I still need to wait for Elder Su's permission. Su bowed. His expression did not change. He could not refuse the gate master's face. He also respected all the elders present. Su still remembered that mysterious, beautiful woman said that as long as he insisted that he was Elder Su's disciple, it would be enough to be a protective talisman. Even the gate master of Shenzhen Gate would not dare to do anything to him before confirming his identity. Square root, look at the original chapter on C. Cool Craftsman website. Therefore, Su thought that if he used Elder Su as a shield, there would be no problem. You have already been apprenticed to Elder Su. When Su Yi's voice fell, everyone's expression changed. Suddenly, all eyes were fixed on Su Yi. It was as if something big had happened. Situ Liuyun's and the right protector's expressions changed. Situ Liuyun's eyes twitched helplessly. Looking at the elders, Gate Master Situ Liuyun and the right protector's gaze, Su Yi was secretly surprised. Was there a need to be so surprised to be apprenticed to Elder Su? Thinking of the mysterious, beautiful woman's words, he secretly gritted his teeth and nodded with certainty. He said, I have indeed been apprenticed to Elder Su. Chapter 397. This disciple has not been under Elder Su's tutelage for long, and was brought back to Shenzhen Gate by Elder Su. It has only been a few days, and coincidentally, Elder Su left Shenzhen Gate for some matters. When Elder Su returns, the sect leader and the various elders will know when they ask. At this point, Su Yi could only bite the bullet and insist that he was Elder Su's disciple. The various elders secretly looked at each other, and Situliun's eyes secretly twitched. Su Yi had just arrived at Shenzhen Gate, so naturally, he could not escape their investigation. They had already known that Su Yi had just arrived at Shenzhen Gate not long ago, and it was indeed Elder Su who had personally brought him back. In this way, what Su Yi said was probably not far from the truth. Adding this brat's talent, if Elder Su really made an exception and accepted him as his disciple, it was really possible. Su Yi, when you became Elder Su's disciple, did Elder Su have anything to tell you? Situlian looked at Su Yi. Her expression and gaze were very complicated at this moment. No, Su Yi shook his head. He felt that the gazes of the sect leader, Situluyun, and the various elders seemed to be hinting at something. He was afraid that if he said too much, it would be better to speak as little as possible. In any case, as long as he insisted that he was Elder Su's disciple, it would be fine. Sect leader, if he is really Elder Su's disciple, then Elder Shangguan, who was originally determined to win, had a dejected look on his face at this moment. No wonder this kid was completely unmoved by his promise. So, he was already Elder Su's disciple. Then, his identity was different. When Elder Su returns, I will investigate this matter myself. Now that you have nothing to do, I will get someone to send you back to the 36 Sword Peaks. Situlian secretly took a deep breath, raised his eyes slightly, and waved his hand at Su Yi, indicating that Su Yi should leave first. Disciple will take his leave. Su Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Looking at the situation, it seemed that Elder Su's disciple had really passed. He didn't even mention anything about the discipline hall. If he didn't leave now, when would he? Su Yi immediately bowed and left. Slow down. Looking at Su Yi, Situlian's gaze was still very complicated. She called out to Su Yi. Su Yi stopped. He looked at Situlian, feeling a little nervous. Whether or not you're Elder Su's disciple is still uncertain. First, go and receive the Shenzhen Gate's outer disciple badge. Just say that you are following my orders. Someone will arrange everything for you. Tomorrow, you will participate in the Shenzhen Gate's Myriad Sword Conference. As for the other matters, wait until Elder Su returns. Situ Luyun said. Disciple will take his leave. Su, he nodded. He was also going to receive the Shunjian Gate's outer disciple badge. As for the other matters, he would wait until Elder Su returned. Then, he would leave it up to fate. When the time came, if Elder Su were to blame him, he could only admit to it. As Su Yi walked out of the hall, the various invisible suppressive forces and the tense and congealed air instantly vanished. His entire body felt relaxed, and he couldn't help but stretch his body. This also caused Su Yi to be quite shocked in his heart. The elders of the Divine Sword sect were all incomparably powerful, especially the head of the Divine Sword sect, Situ Luyun. He was only middle-aged, but the aura that was invisibly emitted from his body was much more powerful than the few elders. Work hard in cultivation. One day, I will become an expert. Clenching his fists tightly, Su Yi's eyes flashed with a red glow. With the primordial chaos supreme technique, the mysterious space, the identity of a soul controller, and the heavenly fate ancient sutra, there would be a day when he could roam the 6 continents and 3 seas freely. Gee, come with me, I'll send you back to the 36th Sword Peak. The roar of a beast could be heard. A disciple of the Xinjiang Gate in armor rode on a huge flying beast as a mount. He was ordered to send Su Yi back. The 72 peaks of the Divine Sword sect were quite far apart from each other. One had to cross over mountains, especially some of the smaller mountains. If one were to walk from the main peak of the Sky Sword Peak to the 36th peak, it would take an entire day to walk there, even if one used their essence. The flying beast mount was actually a heavenly soaring condor that had reached the demon true realm. This caused Su Yi to be inwardly moved. It was not an easy task to tame a heavenly soaring condor as a mount. The heavenly soaring condor looked at Su Yi. For some reason, its fierce eyes were filled with fear. Leaping onto the flying beast mount, Su Yi followed the armored disciple and left. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He had finally passed this stage without any danger. At this moment, Su Yi did not know that Sita Luyun, Yu Chongqing, and the other elders who were left in the hall had extremely complicated expressions on their faces. Sect Master, is this Su Yi really Elder Su's disciple? Elder Lu Baimei took the lead and asked Situ Luyun in the hall. Situ Luyun's face revealed a bitter smile. He smiled helplessly and said, if Elder Su really accepted such a talented disciple, it would be a good thing. Although she said this, for some unknown reason, everyone could see that the smile on Situ Luyun's face was filled with bitterness. That's true. This kid's talent is definitely strong. It's also a good thing that our Shunjian Gate has such a disciple, Elder Mei Huaya said, but his eyes were also filled with embarrassment. If this kid is not an outer court disciple, but Elder Su's disciple, then none of us can compete. Elder Shangwan, who said with a bitter expression on his face, at such a young age, he was already able to defeat the 11th sword. What level will he reach in 5 years? Elder Duan Yuerong's eyes were filled with shock and anticipation. When Ryugan River, Yin Lingfeng, and the others entered the Shunjian Gate 5 years ago, they could not be compared to the current Su Yi. And 5 years later, what level would Su Yi reach? I don't know where Elder Su found this kid. His talent is really good. Elder Yu Chongqing praised sincerely. Tomorrow is the Myriad Sword Conference. We'll know exactly how talented this kid is when the time comes. Situ Luyun spoke as a bright light fluctuated in his eyes. Anticipation gushed out from his eyes. Sect leader, many elders suddenly came to the Sky Sword Peak, saying, suddenly, the armored Shunjian Gate disciple outside the main hall reported. Looking at Elder Yu Chongqing and the others present, he wanted to say something but hesitated. What's the matter? Just say it. The Right Protector said to the armored disciple. Many elders came, saying that they are looking for a disciple called Su Yi. They can't let Elder Yu, Elder Shangwan, and the others get ahead of them and take advantage of him. The armored disciple was also speechless. So many elders came together for an outer court disciple. It seemed that this kind of thing had never happened in the Shenzhen Gate. Update asterisk the fastest person to reach 5 CY. Chapter 398. Who dares to stop us? We're here to see the gate leader. Is Sui inside? We want to see the gate leader. Who dares to stop us? Noises of dispute could be heard from outside the hall. Let the elders in. Sito Luyun smiled bitterly. These elders were probably here for Su Yi and wanted to recruit Su Yi into the sect. The right guardian smiled bitterly. The news of Su Yi defeating the 11th sword had already spread. After these elders received the news, they couldn't sit still anymore. This is big trouble. There are several elders and Elder Shangwan from the punishment hall. Brother Su Yi is in big trouble. He even want to see the gate leader. I still don't know how the gate leader will punish him. I hope Brother Su Yi will be fine. On the 36th sword peak, a group of outer disciples gathered together with a solemn expression. They had seen everything at the Divine Sword Cliff. Su Yi was taken away by several elders to see the gate leader. The consequences were unimaginable. For them, they could only wait for the news anxiously. They didn't even have a place to inquire about the news. I hope Elder Su can come back as soon as possible. Su Jiahui looked solemn. She knew that Su Yi's situation was not optimistic this time. The trouble Su Yi caused shook the entire Xinjiang Gate. Now, the only thing they could count on was that Elder Su could come back as soon as possible. Otherwise, they, as outer sect disciples, would only be able to watch helplessly. Moreover, Su Yi was only an outer disciple and not a disciple of the Xinjiang Gate. The consequences were even more uncertain. Screech. Suddenly, there was a brute beast cry in the sky. A huge flying brute beast circled over. Its fierce aura made Su Jiahui and other disciples tremble. A figure jumped down from the back of the flying brute beast. The broken sword on his back was eye-catching. He had shoulder-length hair, a handsome face, and deep eyes. The flying brute beast circled and left, instantly disappearing into the sky. Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the others looked at the descending figure. They couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, they immediately crowded around him. Brother Su Yi, are you all right? How are you? Zhang Qing asked and ran up excitedly. I'm fine. Nothing happened. Su Yi smiled as he looked at the crowd that was crowding around him. Are you really all right? What did the gate leader say? Su Jiahui was not at ease and asked Su Yi. She had seen with her own eyes that Su Yi was taken to see the sect leader by several elders. How could nothing happen to him? The trouble this guy had caused was not ordinary. I'm really all right. Don't worry. Su Yi nodded his head with certainty. It seemed that the identity of Elder Su's disciple was really useful in the Xinjiang Gate. Elder Shangwan, who from the torture hall, didn't say much. It seemed that he was really fine. Really, hearing this, Su Jiahui's beautiful face and the pair of big clear eyes were still half believing and half doubting. She didn't really believe Su Yi's words. But seeing that Su Yi had returned, Su Jiahui couldn't help but believe in him. It was obvious that it was the people around the gate leader who sent him to the 36th sword peak. Of course it's true. The gate leader didn't convict me. All right, the Myriad Sword Conference is tomorrow. Shouldn't I go and get the badge first? Also, you have to tell me in detail about the Myriad Sword Conference. %, $4D. Sui asked. Tomorrow was the Myriad Sword Conference. Not to mention that when he left the main hall, the gate leader Sito Luyun had also instructed him to participate in the Myriad Sword Conference. Su Yi was also quite curious about the Myriad Sword Conference and was extremely interested in it. Especially after the battle with Sword 11, Su Yi was even more interested in the Myriad Sword Conference. Sword 11 was ranked 15th on the Sword Pagoda and had such cultivation, strength, and talent. During the battle with Sword 11, Su Yi could clearly feel that Sword 11 seemed to have some trump cards. The top 14 existences on the Sword Pagoda were naturally stronger than the previous. This made Su Yi have some thoughts of comparison in his heart. He didn't know how far he could go compared to the younger generation of Xinjiang Gate. The younger generation of the Sacred Mountain, in terms of overall strength, might be much more tyrannical than Xinjiang Gate. Therefore, Su Yi was also looking forward to the Myriad Sword Conference. He didn't know how far he could go if he went all out. After that, Su, Yi, Zhongqing, and the others went to the gate to receive the badges. To receive the badges, one had to go in person. One had to drip blood on the badge and leave one's mark. At that time, the badge would record the information and the points needed in Xinjiang Gate. In short, this badge was the identity symbol of Xinjiang Gate and also had various functions in Xinjiang Gate. And from Zhongqing's words, Su Yi also had a more detailed understanding of the Myriad Sword Conference. After all, he was going to participate in the Myriad Sword Conference tomorrow. The Myriad Sword Conference was held once every 5 years and lasted for a whole month. After the Myriad Sword Conference ended, Xinjiang Gate would welcome a new batch of disciples. At the beginning of the Myriad Sword Conference, the personal disciples would not participate. Only the outer disciples would be tested, and there would be competition between the inner disciples. Outstanding outer sect disciples could still have the opportunity to become inner sect disciples. Although all the disciples had already participated in the test when they entered Xinjiang Gate, 5 years had passed. However, 5 years had passed, and it was very possible that someone's talent had improved in these 5 years. To a certain extent, talents would also change and improve because of treasures and one's own hard work. Although there was not much room for improvement, it was undeniable that there was a chance for improvement. Therefore, in the 5 years at Xinjiang Gate, some people's talents had changed and improved. It was possible for them to reach the standard of an inner disciple. In addition, talents undoubtedly represented one's future in cultivation. But there were always exceptions in this world. Perhaps a disciple with ordinary talents would also have amazing talents after 5 years of hard work. Therefore, the first round of the Myriad Sword Conference was to give these outer disciples another chance. As long as they performed well, they would still have the chance to become inner disciples. But this was also the last chance for these outer disciples. If they did not perform well this time, they would not have the chance to become inner disciples in the future. With these disciples' age, they had already passed the best time to lay down their foundation. No matter what happened in the future, unless they encountered a heaven-defying opportunity, it was almost destined that they would not have the chance to become a true powerhouse. Outer sect disciples who passed the test would not immediately become inner sect disciples. Chapter 399. Su Yi found out that the testing place was called the Heavenly Platform. Rumor had it that as long as one could ascend the heavenly platform, they would reach the heavens in a single step. The heavenly platform had a total of 7 levels. The levels of talent were common grade, good grade, general grade, commander grade, king grade, royal grade, and the legendary heavenly grade. If one could ascend to the 7th level, it would be equivalent to the legendary heaven grade talent. Indeed, it would represent reaching the heavens in a single bound. Rumor had it that those with heavenly grade talent would cause a phenomenon when they were born. They would be destined to conquer the world and look down on all living things. However, heavenly grade was only a legend. Rumor had it that the strongest 5-year disciples had entered the Xinjiang Gate for testing. Yun Lingfeng, Ryugan River, and other disciples had not even reached the 7th level. They had only barely reached the 6th level, and that had already shocked the entire Xinjiang Gate. Outer disciples only needed to reach the 4th level of the heavenly platform to pass the test and have a chance to become an inner disciple. If they failed, they would be destined to never become an inner disciple of the Xinjiang Gate. Outer disciples only needed to pass the test to enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. The battlefield of 10,000 swords was not just a testing ground. It was one of the core events of the Myriad Sword Conference. All inner and outer disciples had a chance to make a great leap. All inner disciples did not need to go to the heavenly platform like the outer disciples. They could directly enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. The battlefield of 10,000 swords was a huge area. The powerhouses of a Xinjiang Gate had controlled it a long time ago. There were many savage beasts inside. Everything was arranged and selected to train the young disciples. The barbaric beasts in there weren't too strong, and they posed a fatal threat to the inner disciples. However, they weren't completely helpless either. This was a true tempering, and there was the danger of bloodshed. However, if one could pass the test, they would have a chance to become a direct disciple of the Xinjiang Gate. It had to be said that the competition was cruel. However, no one would say anything about it. This was a world where the strong were respected. Everything depended on one's strength. It would take at least a month to walk out of the battlefield of 10,000 swords. The huge battlefield of 10,000 swords was beyond the imagination of ordinary people. There were many dangers and crises that could happen at any time. In the end, according to the situation of previous years, out of 10,000 disciples, it was already amazing if there were over 100 who could successfully walk out. Within the myriad sword battlefield, aside from dealing with the dangers that they might face at any time, the disciples also had to search for a type of sword pattern stone. In the entire battlefield of 10,000 swords, the powerhouses of Xinjiang Gate did not put in many sword pattern stones. In the end, only the 68 disciples who obtained the most sword pattern stones could go to the Lingjian Peak for the final showdown. Personal disciples would only enter the myriad sword battlefield half a month later. The strength of a personal disciple was not something that an inner disciple could compare to. In order for inner disciples to have a chance, personal disciples would only enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords half a month later. Otherwise, inner disciples would not have much of a chance to obtain the sword pattern stone. Walking out of the myriad sword battlefield was the final stage of the myriad sword assembly. These disciples who could walk out of the battlefield of 10,000 swords would have the final showdown on the Lingjian Peak. Only the top 68 disciples with the most sword pattern stones were qualified to have the final duel on the Lingjian Peak. $T starter? In the end, the 16 people with the highest ranking would be able to obtain great benefits and a lot of rewards from the Xinjiang Gate. Great benefits and a lot of rewards. Su Yi's eyes flashed. The great benefits and a lot of rewards from the Xinjiang Gate were naturally tempting, but he did not know if he would have the chance in the end. In midair, Su Yi and Zhang Qing were still riding the Gale Golden Eagle to receive the badge of the gate. This Gale Golden Eagle seemed to have made up its mind to follow Su. After Su Yi was taken to the Tianjin Peak by the Elder, it returned to the 36-sword peak to wait. Brother Su Yi, did you subdue this Gale Golden Eagle? Zhang Qing was very strange. This was originally the mount of the torture hall, but it seemed to have been subdued by Su Yi. Su Yi smiled slightly, sat cross-legged on the back of the Gale Golden Eagle, and gently patted the feathers on the back of the Gale Golden Eagle. Su Yi was quite clear in his heart that it should be the aura of the Origin Supreme technique on his body that made the Gale Golden Eagle choose to surrender. It did not leave again and again, as if it had made up its mind to follow him. Well, if there was a chance, he could give this Gale Golden Eagle a good fortune. Not long after, accompanied by Zhang Qing, Su Yi easily received his outer disciple badge under the order of the gate leader. The material of this badge seemed to be similar to primordial stone, with a faint energy fluctuation, but it was not primordial stone. It seemed that there was some kind of method arranged by the strong. After the blood recognition, this badge had already taken effect. After the blood recognition, at this moment, Su Yi seemed to have a certain connection with the badge in his heart. He could clearly feel the situation of the badge, which had the basic 5 points in it. Holding the badge in his hand, Su Yi was also quite emotional. Although he was not a disciple of the Xinjiang Gate, at this moment, the badge that represented an outer disciple in his hand also touched Su Yi's heart. In this Xinjiang Gate, he could be considered to have a legitimate identity. There will be a record of points in the badge. You can also take the badge and come to receive basic medicinal pills at the specified time. Zhang Qing told Su Yi. Points. Su Yi regretted it. He had already handed over a batch of space bags in his hand to the right protector. The space bags contained the badges of Ba, Yi, and the others, but he had forgotten to take the points in the badges first. These points were of great use in the Xinjiang Gate and could be exchanged for anything. By the time Su Yi and Zhang Qing returned to the 36th Sword Peak, it was already dusk. Su Yi had more or less understood the matters of the Myriad Sword Conference. Su Jiahui, Zhang Qing, and the others had also more or less explained, so they did not say anything more. Moreover, Zhang Qing and Su Jiahui did not dare to explain anything. A guy who could defeat the 11th sword. What was there to worry about when he went to the sky-reaching platform tomorrow? At this moment, they should be most worried about themselves. Whether or not they had the chance to become an inner disciple would depend on their own performance tomorrow. If they failed, they would not have another chance in this life. At night, the bright moon was in the sky, and the stars were dim. On the sky's sword peak, Situ Liuyun's eyes were like stars, looking at the bright moon in the sky, as if he was thinking about something. Sect leader, you said that Elder Su did not accept disciples before, but at this time he accepted such a disciple. If this is Su Yi's ordinary disciple, it would be fine, but if it is really a direct disciple, then... Chapter 400. After so many years, it is not bad that Elder Su is able to take in a disciple. Moreover, that Su Yi is indeed talented. Elder Su has brought back such a talented young man for our Divine Sword sect. It is our Divine Sword sect's fortune. Situ Luyun said as the corner of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. Sect leader, how far do you think Su Yi can go on the sky platform tomorrow? Back then, Ryugan River, Yin Lingfeng, and the others had already set foot on the 6th floor. The right protector's voice paused for a moment, and then his eyes lit up with some expectation. He said, does that kid have a chance to set foot on the 7th floor? As his voice fell, the right protector's heart trembled slightly. How could the right protector not know what the 7th floor represented? It was a step to the sky, which only existed in rumors. If someone really ascended to the 7th floor, it would be a great fortune for the entire Shunjian Gate. The 7th floor, Situ Liyun's eyes also lit up with some expectation. That night, the entire Shunjian Gate was sleepless. All the inner and outer disciples were nervous and expectant. The Myriad Sword Conference, which was held once every 5 years, was also a thorough review of their results in the past 5 years. In the end, whether they were dragons or worms would have the final test at this Myriad Sword Conference. Sky platform, I must succeed tomorrow. On the sword peak, the outer disciples clenched their fists, their eyes nervous and determined. I must walk out of the Myriad Sword battlefield. In the courtyard of the towering sword peak, the inner disciples' eyes were shining. Whether they had the chance to become a personal disciple or not depended on their performance in the Myriad Sword battlefield. On the 36th sword peak, outside a quiet courtyard, a gale golden eagle was entrenched outside. Its body was filled with a faint light, and its sharp eyes were fixed on the courtyard. There seemed to be an aura pervading from there, which made its eyes filled with awe. In the room, Su Yi sat cross-legged, forming a seal with his hands. His body was rippling with a faint red light, and his body was circulating the Origin Supreme technique. The 36th sword peak had always been quiet. Su Yi did not have many misgivings as he cultivated the Origin Supreme technique. The night slowly passed. When the final darkness before dawn had just passed, auras began to fluctuate on the various sword peaks within the entire Divine Sword sect. Numerous pairs of eyes opened one after another. Then, under the last moonlight before dawn, figures headed in 2 different directions. At a low altitude, there were also numerous flying barbaric beasts spreading their wings and releasing their auras. Phew! Early in the morning, when Su Yi stopped his breathing and woke up, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Opening his eyes, Su Yi's eyes glowed with a faint crimson light, which then returned to being deep and tenacious. Feeling everything in his body, Su Yi's eyes revealed a faint smile. At the 3rd level of the Origin Spirit Realm, the Yuan Qi within his body had become even more abundant, and the soul force within his mind had also become even more abundant. Crackle, crackle. With a smile on his face, Su Yi stood up and stretched. Cracking sounds came from his joints as he walked out of the room. Su Yi was also looking forward to today's Myriad Sword Conference. Brother Su Yi, Zhang Qing's voice rang out. Then, Zhangqing, Su Jiahui, and the rest of the group had already arrived. Su Yi smiled. Su Jiahui, Zhangqing, and the rest were all in high spirits today. They had all changed into clean clothes. Are you ready? Su Jiahui looked at Su Yi. On his delicate face, a pair of big black eyes were as clear as water. The injuries on his body seemed to have mostly recovered. His face was sparkling, and his skin was as smooth as snow. W quick, 0 plus asterisk E. There's nothing to prepare. Let's go. Su Yi looked at Su Jiahui and smiled. This little girl was still young, but her figure was already exquisite. Her cultivation was at the 7th or 8th level of the origin spirit realm. Her talent was definitely not weak. Let's go quickly. It will take a long time to reach the Heaven's Ascension platform. We are still considered the closest. Those who are further away will probably have already left in the middle of the night. A disciple spoke. They were outer disciples, not inner disciples. They did not have flying savage beasts as mounts and could only walk. Moreover, not all of the inner court disciples had a flying savage beast as a mount. We have mounts. Su Yi smiled and whistled. The Gale golden eagle that was entrenched outside the courtyard immediately responded with a screech. It flapped its wings and circled over, causing the surrounding sand and stones to fly and dust to rise. In the early morning, in the Shunjian Gate, there were thousands of peaks, rolling mountains, towering trees, misty clouds, and rosy clouds. It was like a fairyland. Along the way, there were mountain streams, ancient trees, temples, exotic flowers, and rich energy of heaven and earth. As expected of a divine sword sect, a large sect is good. This is a treasured land. On the back of the Gale golden eagle, Su Yi praised. This was indeed the Xinjiang Gate, a big sect. It was much better to cultivate in such a place than in other places. It was enough to get twice the result with half the effort. Looking down from above, there were more and more people in the mountains. Judging from their clothes, they were all outer disciples. The crowd was so densely packed that it was impossible to count them. There are so many people. They are all going to the Heaven's Ascension platform. Su Yi was surprised. He did not know that there were so many disciples in the Xinjiang Gate. These are all outer disciples. Only the 36 Sword Peak has fewer disciples. The other peaks have hundreds of outer disciples on average. The total number of outer disciples in the Xinjiang Gate is about 20,000. Zhang Qing said, compared to the number of outer disciples in the other peaks, the 36 Sword Peak was pitifully small. There were only a dozen outer disciples in the 36 Sword Peak. After a while, there was a huge peak in front of them. There were 3 big words, Heaven's Ascension Platform, engraved on it. The words were flamboyant and carried the power of sword chi. There was a majestic and vigorous force. It was like a dormant, ancient, ferocious beast overlooking the crowd. This was the Heaven's Ascension Platform. It was surrounded by mountains, and there was a huge square in the middle that could accommodate tens of thousands of people. We are here. There's so many people. There was a small dimple on Su Jiahui's delicate face. She was amazed by the densely packed figures below. Let's go down. The flying savage beasts are not allowed to enter, Zhang Qing said to Su Yi. Flying savage beasts were not allowed to enter the Heaven's Ascension platform. Then, Su Yi and the others alighted from the Gale golden eagle, which caused a great commotion. After all, there were very few outer disciples who could ride on flying savage beasts. There are so many people, the disciples on the 36th Sword Peak exclaimed. At this moment, there were about 20,000 people around the Heaven's Ascension platform. Some disciples were still on their way. Today, on the Heaven's Ascension platform, let's see who can reach the sky in one step. Zhang Qing sighed. There was a sense of oppression in her heart. Chapter 4:01 Heaven Ascension Platform. Su Yi looked at the towering Heaven Ascension platform in front of him. It was like a giant mountain that had its peak cut off and was surrounded by neat bluestone steps. At this moment, in this dense crowd, Su Yi couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement in his heart. Su Yi was a young man after all. Such a grand event made Su Yi excited. At this moment, He also wanted to know how far he could go on this Heaven Ascension platform. There are a total of 7 levels on the Heaven Ascension platform. The first level has 700 steps, the second level has 600 steps, the third level has 500 steps, and the 7th level has only 100 steps. However, the higher you go, the greater the pressure. Not only does it test your talent, but it also tests your combat strength. It will be a comprehensive test. If you can step onto the 4th level, you will pass and have a great chance of becoming an inner disciple. Su Jiahui knew that this was Su Yi's first time on the Heaven Ascension platform. She told Su Yi everything, and her eyes were filled with nervousness. Outer disciples like them had to step onto the 4th level, which meant that they had the talent of the commander grade to have a chance of becoming an inner disciple. A comprehensive test. Su Yi was excited. Back in the barbarian city, Wang Xuanda of the Sacred Mountain had tested him for having 4 attributes and was qualified to be a servant. However, this Heaven Ascension platform was a comprehensive test, including combat strength. Would he be able to step on it, or would the Heaven Ascension platform be like the vitality testing stone and determine that he was qualified to be a servant? Although he didn't care how the heavenly platform would determine his talent, he didn't care. Along the way, He knew best what his so-called servant qualification was, but he was also looking forward to it. It's him, Yi, the outer disciple of the 36th Sword Peak. Is he the one who defeated Sword 11? Why is he here? It seems that he is indeed an outer disciple. Otherwise, he would need to come to the Heaven Ascension platform to be tested. Soon, the Gale Golden Eagle's movements frightened Yi, and he was recognized. That day at the Divine Sword Cliff, there were many disciples who witnessed Yi defeating Sword 11 with their own eyes. Swish, swish, numerous gazes were cast over, and all of them were sizing him up curiously. Those outer disciples who had not seen Yi defeat Sword 11 with their own eyes were surprised and puzzled. Did such a young man really have the strength to defeat Sword 11, who was ranked 15th in the Sword Pagoda? Many of the nearby disciples looked at Yi, Zhang Qing, and the others with goodwill. Some of them smiled and nodded. "Come here, this is a good spot." A disciple spoke up and made room for Zhang Qing, Su Jiahui, and the others. At this moment, it was really not easy to find a good spot in this densely packed crowd. "Thanks." Zhang Qing smiled. This was the first time she had been treated so politely. Of course, Zhang Qing knew very well that this was all because of Yi. They were just basking in Yi's glory. Normally, no one would be so polite to the disciples of the 36th Sword Peak. It seemed that the time was not up yet. There were still disciples rushing over from all directions. The surrounding people were noisy and gathered into a hubbub that shot into the sky. Below the secret heaven platform, there were many deacons of Shunjian Gate and some older disciples maintaining order, waiting for the secret heaven platform to open. Far away from the secret heaven platform, there was a mountain peak surrounded by clouds. At this moment, there were 2 figures on the mountain peak. The invisible aura seemed to have frozen the surrounding void. These 2 people were the sect leader of Shunjian Gate, Sita Luyun, and the Right Guardian. It seems that many elders are not paying attention to the battlefield of 10,000 swords, but are instead paying attention to the secret heaven platform. The Right Guardian looked around and smiled faintly. The direct disciples have not yet entered the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Some of the inner disciples may be outstanding, but it is not enough to attract the attention of the elders. Today, on the secret heaven platform, I am afraid that many people want to know how far Yi can go. Situ Luyun said softly, looking at the secret heaven platform in the distance with anticipation in her eyes. This Yi has such strength at such a young age. It is indeed amazing. I also want to know how far he can go. The Right Guardian sighed. Yi's performance in Shunjian Gate was indeed too amazing. It was so amazing that it attracted the attention of all the elders. Time passed slowly. In front of the secret heaven platform, there were more and more discussions. In the end, it gathered into a hubbub that shot into the sky. "It is almost time. All disciples, be quiet." Suddenly, there was such a voice. In front of the secret heaven platform, there was an old man who spoke. His voice was not loud, but it fell clearly in everyone's ears. Beside the old man, there was a group of disciples in armor. Their eyes were as sharp as lightning. At first glance, it was obvious that they were disciplined. Their cultivation levels were high, and they were maintaining order in front of the secret heaven platform. The hubbub in the surroundings suddenly stopped, and everyone began to prepare for battle. Everyone's attention was immediately focused on the heaven's ascension platform. The atmosphere became extremely tense and silent. On the secret heaven platform, you have to do your best. This is a test for you in the past 5 years. Those who reach the 4th level will be sent directly to the battlefield of 10,000 swords. The old man's eyes swept across the surroundings. His eyes narrowed, and they were filled with radiance. Boom! As the old man's voice fell, the void suddenly trembled. The secret heaven platform in front of them seemed to be shaking. Then light filled the air. There were bursts of astral wind in the surroundings. The entire platform was filled with ancient runes, as if it was alive. Walala, in an instant, the secret heaven platform shone brightly. It was as if it was covered by a circle of divine halos. It was like a sun that was competing with the rising sun in the morning. A boundless aura swept across the ancient boundless earth. The secret heaven platform is open. Many disciples quietly clenched their fists. Their blood was boiling. This was a test for them in the past 5 years at the Xinjiang Gate. If they could reach the 4th level, they would be able to enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. They were extremely excited. Once they entered the battlefield of 10,000 swords, they would have the opportunity to fight side by side with the inner disciples and even the direct disciples. Even if they were defeated by the inner sect disciples and personal disciples, it would still be an unimaginable glory in the future. Ryugan River, Yin Lingfeng, and other monstrous existences would enter the battlefield of 10,000 swords. Even if they were defeated in the battlefield of 10,000 swords, it would still be an honor. It would be a kind of outstanding capital. Dozens of years later, when Ryugan River, Yin Lingfeng, and other monstrous disciples would become the top experts in the legends, they would be able to tell others that they and Ryugan River were from the same sect. When they were young, they had fought in the battlefield of 10,000 swords. What an honor it was. As long as you are strong enough, you will have the opportunity to become an inner disciple or even a direct disciple. 5 years ago, you were slightly inferior. Today, 5 years later, whether you can make a comeback, whether you can reach the heavens in a single step, depends on your performance today. Chapter 4:02. Without a doubt, the old man's words were extremely provocative. Immediately, the outer sect disciples present felt their blood rush to their heads. Their nervousness was greatly reduced, and their fighting spirit was raised. I must step onto the 4th level. Zhang Qing's eyes shone. She was encouraged, and her fists were clenched tightly. Her fighting spirit was high. Now, I announce the official start of the Myriad Sword Conference. Everyone, step onto the secret tower of heaven. The old man raised his hand, and his voice was like thunder. Suddenly, he waved his hand. Boom! As the old man's voice fell, the atmosphere reached its peak and soared into the sky. Waves of aura gushed out, and one by one, figures stepped onto the secret tower of heaven from all directions. Su Yi's eyes shone with a dazzling light. At this moment, in the dense crowd, he also involuntarily rushed towards the secret tower of heaven. The secret tower of heaven was too big. It was like a giant mountain, and one could climb up from all sides. There were more than 20,000 outer sect disciples present. At this moment, all of them were rushing towards the secret tower of heaven, but it did not seem too crowded. Some people had already stepped onto the secret tower of heaven. It did not seem to be strenuous at all. They were running up the steep steps as if they were flying, as if they wanted to rush up in one go. We must succeed. Many of them had determined eyes, and their fists were clenched tightly. Walala! As they stepped onto the secret tower of heaven, their bodies shone with light. Some had red and green light fluctuations. Some had black light, Some had golden light, and some had blue light lingering around them. These were all attribute lights. As soon as they stepped onto the secret tower of heaven, their attributes were immediately detected. The entire secret tower of heaven was equivalent to a large yuan testing stone. The old man who spoke stood at the side and silently watched the dense crowd of disciples rush up the secret tower of heaven. But he knew in his heart, 5 years ago, this batch of outer sect disciples was eliminated. Their talent was not enough to become an inner sect disciple. Today, 5 years later, only 1 or 2 out of 100 had the chance to succeed. There were more than 20,000 outer sect disciples present. After passing the test, only 200 or 300 people would be selected to become inner sect disciples. That was the highest number. Although talent could be improved with resources and one's own efforts, the improvement would not be too great. Amidst the surging crowd, He was also pushed onto the Heaven Ascension platform. His eyes were deep as he stepped onto the platform. Boom! As he stepped onto the stone steps of the Heaven's Ascension platform, a huge crushing force suddenly descended, causing Su Yi's feet to tremble, and he almost fell down. Instantly, Yuan Qi gushed out from Su Yi's body. His body stood tall and straight as both of his feet stepped on the ground. At the same time, rays of light erupted from Su Yi's body. Black, green, red, and wind rays of light surged out. They were resplendent and dazzling as they alternated and lingered around Su Yi's body. When the 4 types of dazzling light spread out and lingered around Su Yi's body, an obscure aura suddenly fluctuated in the distant void. 4 attributes. How can there be 4 attributes? Sigh. Although I have the wind attribute, the other 3 attributes are in a mess, with no primary or secondary attributes. How can this be? How can there be 4 attributes? Sigh. Faintly from the surrounding mountain peaks, there were sighs that were difficult for outsiders to detect. On the towering mountain peaks, Sita Luyun and the Right Protector's eyes were also stunned, and their gazes changed greatly. How can this be? The Right Protector's gaze was filled with regret. 4 attributes was almost enough to prove that he did not have much talent. Although the wind attribute is a special attribute, there are also earth, water, and fire attributes at the same time. The 4 attributes are in a mess, and there are no primary or secondary attributes. Of the 3 earth, water, and fire attributes, there are 2 that counter each other, Situ Luyin's side. The Yuan Qi attributes were in a mess and counter each other. In the future, there would not be much development on the path of cultivation. It was equivalent to limiting everything. What a pity, what a pity. The Right Protector was regretful. The higher the expectations, the greater the disappointment. For attributes, this talent is ordinary. The 4 attributes seem to be very chaotic. His talent is too ordinary. Can he really defeat the 11th sword? The changes on Su Yi's body, the 4 attribute lights lingering around him, immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding disciples, causing some commotion. But at this moment, these disciples did not pay too much attention to it. On the Heaven Ascension platform, they were testing, and it was most important that they could pass. Ha ha ha, so it's just a person with low talent. In the crowd, there was a figure sneering. This was an outer disciple who had been beaten up by Su Yi before. At this moment, when he accidentally saw the attribute lights on Su Yi's body, he immediately sneered and was in a good mood. When the attribute lights lingered around his body, the surrounding discussions also fell into Su Yi's ears. Boom! At the same time, on the Heaven Ascension platform, a vast crushing force continued to fall on Su Yi's body, like a huge rock falling on his shoulder, wanting to bend Su Yi's waist. The crushing force became stronger and stronger, as if to prevent Su Yi from going forward, not allowing Su Yi to take a step forward. Obviously, the crushing force that Su Yi was facing at this moment was much stronger than anyone else. This kind of powerful crushing force could be clearly felt by outsiders. Those with mediocre talent cannot set foot on the Heaven Ascension platform. They will be crushed. A disciple said, looking surprised. He had heard the inner disciples in the sect mention that the Heaven Ascension platform was very mysterious. The higher one's talent, the smaller the resistance they would encounter. Those with insufficient talent could not even set foot on the Heaven Ascension platform. It seems that his talent is really ordinary, and he is being ostracized by the Heaven Ascension platform. On the mountain peaks far away in all directions, there is a faint fluctuation of aura, and a sigh of regret could be faintly heard. What a pity. His cultivation is not bad, but his talent is restricted. On the towering mountain peak, the right protector looked at the Heaven Ascension platform from afar and felt the movement on the Heaven Ascension platform. It was the Heaven Ascension platform that was stopping those with mediocre talent. Sita Luyuan did not say anything. There was a ripple in the light on her face that did not show anger. It was clear that there was a regretful expression fluctuating. Boom! On the Heaven Ascension platform, Yuan Qi surged within Su Yi's body, flowing through his meridians, creating a sound like a stream. Su Yi used his Yuan Qi to resist the invisible crushing force. He raised his head and stuck out his chest, standing tall and straight without bending his back. At this moment, the crushing force made Su Yi feel that the Heaven Ascension platform was targeting him. You also want to stop me? Today I want to go up. What can you do about it? The Heaven Ascension platform's obstruction had aroused Su Yi's fighting spirit. He was not convinced and was proud. Wang Xuanda's Yuan Qi testing stone on the holy mountain had determined that he had the talent to be a servant. Was the Heaven Ascension platform the same? Su Yi was not convinced. He was not convinced and was proud. Chapter 403. Elemental Qi flowed through the wide meridians in his body, causing a strong vibration. Su Yi was stubborn and proud. He walked up the stairs, step by step, with his head held high and his chest puffed out. Under the invisible pressure, Su Yi's every step seemed to be strenuous. With the huge force stopping him, every time he landed, his body would tremble slightly. That little fellow seems to be unconvinced. On the peak of the mountain, the right protector frowned. There was a new fluctuation in his eyes, but he was still regretful. The right protector was very clear that the Heaven Ascension platform was set up by the ancestors of the Xinjin Gate. There would never be a mistake. It was a comprehensive test. Those who were not talented enough would be crushed and unable to climb up the Heaven Ascension platform. Even if that little fellow was unconvinced, what could he do? Sita Luyuan seemed to be about to leave. She looked at the unwilling and stubborn figure on the platform of Heaven Ascension in the distance. She did not say anything, but she stopped and looked into the distance. There were many hidden auras in the surrounding space that looked over once more. Step by step, Su Yi climbed up the stairs. His speed was not much slower than the other outer disciples. Although it was strenuous to circulate the Yuan Qi in his body, Su Yi had not reached a point where he was truly exhausted. Kel Su Yi could still support himself. 100 steps, 300 steps, 700 steps. Soon, Su Yi reached the second level. With such talent, he actually reached the second level. The other outer disciples were surprised. Looking at the 4 different attributes surrounding Su Yi's body, they knew that his talent was ordinary. But he actually managed to reach the second level. They could not help but be surprised. This is only the second level. It is said that Su Yi's battle strength is very strong. He should have relied on his battle strength to reach the second level. But I don't think he can go up. A disciple whispered. He had heard the inner disciples talk about the Heaven Ascension platform before. Brother Su Yi, come on, let's go up together. Zhang Qing appeared beside Su Yi. He also saw the attribute light around Su Yi's body. He was a little disappointed, but he did not care. He was supporting Su Yi. Su Yi smiled faintly. His gaze was deep as he continued to walk. 300, 500, 600, the third level. How can this guy be so fast? An outer disciple was surprised. He had been following Su Yi for a long time and found that Su Yi's speed was not below his. Boom! The invisible crushing force was even stronger, as if it was coming from all directions and wanted to crush Su Yi's body. Brother Su Yi, we can definitely reach the 4th level. Zhang Qing opened his mouth, gasping for breath. His face was covered in bean-sized sweat, as if it was extremely strenuous for him. He looked up and saw a familiar figure. Junior Sister Jiahui is right in front. She will definitely succeed. He looked up. In the middle of the third level, there was a familiar figure. Her youthful curves had already revealed her beauty as she walked up the stairs step by step. Continue. He continued to move up step by step. The invisible crushing force was getting stronger and stronger. Only he knew the extent of the crushing force. It was much stronger than the other disciples. Isn't it just the heaven ascension platform? If I can't even reach this level, how can I reach the holy mountain? Su Yi's eyes flickered, and the qi in his body was constantly surging. The sound of the qi vibrating in his meridians was like thunder. Soon, Su Yi felt the crushing force changing. Everything around him started to blur. It was as if all the outer disciples around him had disappeared. Suddenly, there was a change in front of him. The air trembled, and the steep stone steps under his feet gradually turned into an endless wave. Rumble. The waves surged, setting off stormy waves that swept towards Su Yi with earth-shattering force, as if they wanted to sweep everything away. Monstrous waves surged into the sky. Merely the rumbling and shocking momentum alone seemed capable of tearing people into pieces, capable of devouring everything. This is an illusion. It's just an illusion. Su Yi's eyes did not move. It was just an illusion. He continued to move forward step by step. Rumble. The monstrous waves seemed to have been rolling down in front of Su Yi. The monstrous waves were monstrous, and their power was getting more and more shocking. When the monstrous waves fell in front of Su Yi, they disappeared. Whoosh! After a while, the endless sea changed. The monstrous waves gradually disappeared. The temperature was getting lower and lower. An endless glacier appeared in front of him. The temperature was so cold that it seemed to be able to freeze everything. His soul could not help but tremble. Come on, it's just an illusion. Su Yi's body seemed to be glowing. He did not stop and continued to move forward step by step. On the third level of the heavenly platform, many disciples had stopped in their tracks, beads of sweat dripping down their foreheads. Their faces were bright red, but they gritted their teeth and continued to climb. It was as if every step they took required all the strength they could muster. Isn't that Su Yi? How can Su Yi still be able to come up? The disciple who was gasping for breath and found it difficult to move forward saw Su Yi. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Wasn't this guy's talent average? Why was it so difficult for them? Although this guy looked like he was struggling, his speed did not decrease at all. He had already surpassed many people. There were only 100 steps left to reach the fourth level. Su Jiahui looked sideways and saw Su Yi. His eyes were shining brightly. His body was shrouded in the light of 4 different attributes. Step by step, he seemed to be struggling, but he continued to climb. Soon, the back of the figure was far away. His long black hair swayed slightly. The broken sword on his back was also shrouded in light. You can do it. Su Jiahui's eyes flickered. Her body was shrouded in the light of 2 different attributes. There was also a third attribute that was difficult to detect. It emitted a faint fluorescent light. The yuan qi in her body surged and followed Su Yi's footsteps. How can he be so fast? Zhang Qing was already far behind. She looked at the figure with the broken sword in front of her. She was puzzled. Was this guy really average? Why did she feel that he was not average at all? I finally passed. On the 4th level, an outer disciple was sweating profusely and gasping for breath. But when he stepped on the stone steps of the 4th level, he was wild with joy. He was so excited that tears were about to fall. 5 years ago, he was a failure and could not step on the 4th level. He could only become an outer disciple. In these 5 years, he did not dare to be negligent. He worked hard to cultivate. It was all for this day. Now he had succeeded and stepped on the 4th level. His hard work made up for his lack of talent. He had a great chance to become an inner disciple. I've also succeeded. I've really succeeded. Mother, father, I've succeeded. I did not disappoint the family. Chapter 404. For someone to be able to step into the fourth level, other than the hard work they put in the Divine Sword sect, it was also inseparable from the support of their family. They were shouldering the future and fate of their entire family. On the fourth level, there was an entrance with spatial fluctuations, and a light screen rippled. This was a spatial portal. Entering, it would lead to the battlefield of 10,000 swords and train with the inner disciples who had already entered the battlefield. However, some people were still hesitating. Reaching the fourth level was already the limit. If they continued, there would be no hope. Sui. How come his talent is here too? It's Sui. He defeated the 11th sword, but his talent seems to be mediocre. Isn't it said that those with mediocre talent can't reach the heavenly platform? The disciples who had reached the fourth level saw Sui. His figure was even more dazzling. He had also reached the fourth level. Square root equals cool $T Craftsman 4's net T unique, a positive CY edition Z. Others equals, yes, pirate edition, and voila. The blazing flame seemed to be able to burn everything. It wanted to burn Sui to ashes. It made people's hair stand on end and their skin burn. The invisible crushing force was still increasing. Is that all? It's just an illusion. Sui's deep eyes were calm. When he was refining his diamond body in the barbarian demon forest, he needed the fire of the earth's core to refine it. He had endured it, and this was just an illusion. Step by step, Sui climbed the stairs. His black hair and gray robe fluttered. He didn't stop. He's still going up. The disciples on the fourth level were surprised. Sui was still going up. He didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Let's go. Let's see how far we can go. Some people gritted their teeth. Their pale faces were filled with determination. They wanted to continue and see how far they could go. If they could reach the fifth level, their future would be limitless. This is interesting. I heard that it's not easy for those who don't have enough talent to reach the fifth level. Not only will it be difficult, but there will also be various illusions. But this guy has already reached the fourth level. The protector of the right gazed into the distance from the towering mountain peak. His eyes glowed. All kinds of illusions depend on the person. This is a method set up by the ancestors of the Xinjiang Gate. It will target one's attributes. Not only will it test one's battle prowess and talent, it will also test one's willpower, determination, and perseverance. Sita Luyuan said softly. Looks like that kid is really not simple, the right protector said. It seems a little too early to say that it won't be easy. It's only the fourth level. With that boy's battle prowess, he was able to defeat the 11th sword. It's not impossible for him to forcefully ascend to the fourth level by relying on his battle prowess, Sita Luyuan said. His gaze looked into the distance, and he was once again filled with anticipation. Voila! Astral winds whistled, capable of scraping bones. They swept out like sharp blades, causing one's heart to tremble. At this moment, Sui was in the middle of the astral wind. It was as if he was being cut into pieces by 1,000 blades. The intense pain from his body and the terrifying crushing force seemed to remind Sui that this was not an illusion, but reality. What can an illusion do to me? Sui's deep gaze was firm. In this astral wind, there was an obvious wind attribute aura. The gravity, sea, and flames that had just passed through all had an obvious earth, water, and fire attribute aura. It seemed that all these illusions had a lot to do with the elemental chi in his body. But this was an illusion. The soul in Sui's mind did not seem to be affected. It clearly told him that this was just an illusion. Puff! On the fourth level, after a few steps, a disciple's body trembled. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood on his pale face. He was unable to go any further. It's too difficult. I can't go any further. Some disciples had already collapsed. Their faces were ashen. After just a few steps, they could no longer support themselves. It was difficult to go any further. The higher they went, the more terrifying the invisible pressure was. They had no choice but to give up. It was difficult for them to go any further. This guy is still going up. Could it be that he can reach the fifth level? Everyone looked at Sui, who was continuing to climb the stairs. They could not help but be shocked. If he really reached the fifth level, It meant that he was a king grade talent. He had reached the 5th level with his combat strength. This was probably even more shocking. Step by step, Su Yi's figure was getting higher and higher. Another disciple stepped onto the 4th level. While they were happy and excited, they looked at the figure who was about to reach the 5th level and felt a little discouraged. Those who had not tried chose to try, but after a few steps, they chose to give up because they could not go any further. There was a great pressure that far exceeded the stone steps of the 4th level. It made them breathless. Su Jiahui's figure appeared on the 4th level. Her slightly young and exquisite figure was already attractive. Her face was pale, and sweat had soaked her hair. She looked up at the familiar figure who was about to reach the 5th level and chose to continue. This seems to be Su Jiahui from the 36th Sword Peak. She actually came up. The disciples looked at each other. Usually, no one went to the 36th Sword Peak. The disciples of the 36th Sword Peak rarely came out, so they were not familiar with it. The strong wind was blowing, and the primordial qi in Su Yi's body was surging. His body was shining as he walked step by step, neither fast nor slow. Boom! Suddenly, when he stepped out, the strong wind suddenly disappeared. At the same time, everything in front of him suddenly became clear. Is it the 5th level? Looking around, Su Yi's eyes moved. At this moment, he had already stepped onto the 5th level. It's the 5th level, on the towering mountain peak. The right guardian's eyes could not help but tremble. With such mediocre talent, he had stepped onto the 5th level. Only a king-grade talent could step onto the 5th level. In the void around, there were many hidden auras. At this moment, undetectable fluctuations appeared in the air. Many hidden auras gathered on the Heaven Ascension platform. The 5th level. Su Yi has actually reached the 5th level. On the 4th level, there were already dozens of disciples who were looking at the figure who had already stepped onto the 5th level. Their eyes trembled and they were shocked. The guy had really stepped onto the 5th level. Boom! Suddenly, the entire Heaven Ascension platform shook for no reason. What's going on? All the disciples who were on the Heaven Ascension platform were shocked. It was as if their souls were throbbing uneasily, as if they had a bad premonition. Whoosh! At the same time, the entire Heaven Ascension platform suddenly shone brightly in the void. A dazzling golden light enveloped the entire Heaven Ascension platform. The mysterious runes on the Heaven Ascension platform were flowing with golden light. It was magnificent and solemn. At this moment, in all directions, there were hidden auras fluctuating. What's going on? On the towering mountain peak, the right guardian was surprised. He had never heard of such a change in the Heaven Ascension platform. At this moment, the entire Heaven Ascension platform seemed to have changed. It was shrouded in golden light, and there was an invisible pressure that filled the air. It's said that when a great talent appears, the Heaven Ascension platform will test him individually. Could it be? Chapter 405. Solo Test. The right protector's eyes lit up, and his expression became solemn and nervous. There was a powerful aura fluctuating from his body. Shrouded in golden light, the Heaven Ascension platform was solemn and dignified. What's going on? I can't even take half a step forward. I can't go up. What's going on? Why can't I go up? At this moment, all the disciples on the 4 sides of the platform suddenly realized that they could not take half a step forward. At this moment, each of them felt as if they were being crushed by 100,000 mountains. They were imprisoned on the spot, and if they tried to force their way up, they would vomit blood. Su Yi looked up. At this moment, under the golden light, he could clearly feel that all the crushing forces seemed to be targeting him. Come on. Su Yi lifted his foot again, and the primordial qi in his body surged, and he headed towards the 6th level. Boom! The Heaven Ascension platform trembled, and a great pressure enveloped it. The aura fluctuated, and the mysterious runes flickered. The mighty crushing force suddenly enveloped Su Yi's body with a solemn and mighty force. At this moment, the crushing force had become very different. This crushing force was not only on the physical body, but also on the soul. It was as if it wanted to crush Su-yi from the inside out. This crushing force was like a mountain falling down, causing Su-yi's body to tremble. Rumble. At the same time, Su-yi no longer held back the primordial chi in his body. It surged with all its might and rumbled like thunder in his wide meridians. Su-yi's eyes were red, and he continued to climb up the platform step by step. Oh my God! How can Su-yi still go up? At this moment, on the four sides of the Heaven Ascension platform, only one of the disciples could see Su-yi. However, when they saw that only Su-yi was continuing to climb up the platform, they were all puzzled and shocked. Isn't this guy's talent mediocre? How can he still go up? Some disciples were puzzled. Su-yi's talent was clearly very mediocre, but he had already reached the 5th level. Yet, he was still able to ascend the stairs. This was too shocking. Su-yi was able to defeat the 11th sword. His battle prowess is too shocking. Maybe he relied on his terrifying battle prowess to force his way up. A disciple said. His body trembled under the pressure of the Heaven Ascension platform. I feel that Su-yi is extraordinary. She was able to defeat the 11th sword. How stunning is that? Moreover, she is so young. Perhaps she really has a chance to reach the 6th floor. Some of the disciples were moved. They had an inexplicable confidence in Su-yi. They had heard too many rumors about Su-yi in the past few days. After all, his talent is mediocre. I'm afraid that the 6th floor is too difficult. It represents royal-level talent. Ascending to the 6th floor with his own strength is too terrifying. Many disciples murmured softly. This was also what they were thinking. No matter how strong a person's battle prowess was, if it was compared to a royal-level talent, it would be too terrifying. Not necessarily. This Su-yi is very mysterious. Look, it seems that he is the only one who can continue to ascend the stairs. Maybe he really can reach the 6th floor. Many disciples were also biased towards Su-yi. At this moment, under the pressure of the Heaven Ascension platform, only a figure could continue to ascend the stairs. How shocking was that? Brother Su-yi, do your best. On the 3rd level of the Heaven Ascension platform, Zhang Qing was already unable to move an inch. She watched from afar as the figure shrouded in golden light climbed the stairs with his head held high. Although she didn't know what had happened, she secretly supported him in her heart. Rumble. Gradually, as Su-yi ascended the stairs on the 5th level of the Heaven Ascension platform, the golden light around him fluctuated. As Su-yi's every step landed, the void around him trembled slightly. There was a muffled sound like muffled thunder that spread out. Rumble. A muffled sound like thunder spread out. Su-yi's every step was like a heavenly drum being hammered. Faintly, the Heaven Ascension platform roared. In the golden light, there was a violent fluctuation of energy. It was inexplicably shocking, causing people to tremble in fear. With every step, Su-yi suffered a huge pressure. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on him. The invisible pressure shook his soul. This kind of pressure was too terrifying. It was beyond imagination. At this moment, Su-yi was getting more and more strained. However, he still gritted his teeth and continued. His back was still straight, unyielding and proud, unyielding and firm. Around the void, an invisible and obscure aura fluctuated and locked onto Su-yi's body. On the towering mountain peak, Situ Lioyun's eyes were burning like flames. It seemed that as Su-yi continued to ascend the stairs, the flames in her eyes were also rising. This is too shocking. Can he really set foot on the 6th level? The right protector whispered. Unknowingly, her expression became nervous. Her eyes were fixed on the Heaven Ascension platform. At the last 50 steps, Su-yi was getting more and more strained. The invisible pressure had reached its limit. It was as if his body was about to be torn apart. This kind of tearing and crushing did not only affect the body, but also the soul. You want to stop me? I'm going to ascend. Su-yi shouted in his heart. His diamond body and heavenly origin demon soul played a huge role at this moment. On the diamond body, his skin glowed like warm jade. It made Su-yi look like a ball of light, shining brightly and bathing under the golden light. However, all of this was too far away. coupled with Su Yi's robe covering his body, no one could see this scene clearly. Otherwise, they would be shocked. In his mind, under the invisible pressure, Su Yi's soul trembled. However, at this moment, under Su Yi's heavenly origin demon soul, there was a great pressure in his soul. It contained a destructive and majestic aura, spreading out from the depths of his soul. This destructive and majestic aura came from the depths of Su Yi's soul. It came from the heavenly origin demon soul, and not from the mysterious ball of light. Su Yi did not want the mysterious ball of light to interfere at this moment. Based on Su Yi's understanding of the mysterious ball of light, if the mysterious ball of light in his mind made a move, it would be enough to deal with everything. At this moment, Su Yi wanted to test himself. He wanted to see if he could step onto the Heaven Ascension platform with his true strength. The pressure was too great. The invisible pressure seemed to be able to crush everything. The pressure seemed to be getting stronger. With the diamond body and heavenly origin demon soul, although Su Yi could still hold on, his body felt like it was going to be torn apart at any time. However, Su Yi was fearless. What had he not experienced over the years? The pressure in his mind and soul flowed and spread, resisting the pressure and releasing a destructive and majestic aura. On the surface of his body, Su Yi's skin glowed with an endless vitality. There was an endless stream of vitality that nourished his body and supported him to continue climbing the steps. Rumble. The sound of thunder became clearer and clearer, and the pressure became stronger and stronger. The last 30 steps, 20 steps, 5 steps. Chapter 406. They watched with their own eyes as that figure walked step by step along the steps under the thunderous rumbling. That young man's body was surrounded by 4 different types of light. At that moment, it was no longer a symbol of mediocrity. Instead, it was a dazzling divine halo that enveloped the tall and straight figure of a mountain. That young man carried a sword on his back as he stepped on the stairs. His aura was majestic and holy. His aura made people feel intimidated from the depths of their souls. Such a sign stunned everyone who could see it at this moment. That young man was actually using such a method to step onto the Tower of Heaven. That was a strange phenomenon. How shocking. Too powerful. I feel that Brother Su Yi is going to stir up a storm. Zhang Qing's eyes trembled. She was dumbfounded. She was secretly cheering for him. Everyone was stunned. Such a scene was simply too shocking. That young man was like a young war god at that moment. That divine halo enveloped him. That golden light was dazzling. Boom! Suddenly, Su Yi took another step and stepped onto the stairs. On the Tower of Heaven, there was a sudden violent trembling sound. The golden light that enveloped the Tower of Heaven suddenly dispersed. Rays of light danced in the air. At this moment, all the pressure on the heaven-reaching platform seemed to have disappeared in an instant. There was no pressure on the Tower of Heaven anymore. Even the Tower of Heaven itself seemed to have dimmed. There was no more light. What's going on? Could it be that Su Yi has failed? Someone was shocked. Could it be that Su Yi had failed? Something's wrong. Look, Su Yi seems to have reached the 6th floor. Suddenly, a disciple cried out in surprise. They could clearly see that Su Yi had already landed on the 6th floor. At that moment, Su Yi had stepped onto the 6th floor. The light around him dimmed. However, from inside to outside, his body was still dazzling. His aura was astonishing. It seemed like it was still expanding. Boom! Almost at the same time, the sky and earth were trembling. The light that had just disappeared on the Tower of Heaven suddenly appeared again and merged with each other. A beam of light shone down from the depths of the sky, once again landing on Su Yi. At that instant, an even stronger aura descended from all directions, covering the entire heaven-reaching platform. The disciples who had just felt the pressure disappear did not even have time to react before they were once again crushed to the ground. It was as if they were on a roller coaster, and their hearts were throbbing. This pressure is too strong. Some disciples paled as their hearts raced, and their yuan qi froze. This pressure was far more terrifying than before. The 6th floor Su Yi has reached the 6th floor. Cries of surprise rose and fell one after another as everyone raised their heads with great difficulty. At that moment, on the 6th level of the sky ascension platform, the young man's black hair draped over his shoulders. His gray robe fluttered in the wind, and the broken sword on his back was eye-catching. His body seemed to be glowing, and he was surrounded by a divine halo. Looking at the thin figure from afar, they felt their souls tremble. It was as if a young war god had descended to the mortal realm. He really reached the 6th floor. This is comparable to a royal grade talent. Su Yi is comparable to a royal grade talent with his own combat strength. This is amazing. He's too strong. I didn't expect that there would be such an amazing person among the outer disciples. Who said that talent determines whether one can become an expert? Su Yi is an exception. He is the pride of the outer disciples of the Shunjian Gate. Some of the disciples exclaimed. They were excited and shocked, and their blood was surging. Who said that talent determined everything? Who said that they were not talented enough and could never be compared to the inner disciples and direct disciples? The young man, named Su Yi, in front of him was a living example. On the towering mountain peak, the right guardian's eyes were trembling, and his heart was pounding. The 6th floor, he reached the 6th floor with his own combat strength. He's too strong, too fierce. The right guardian was shocked, and his eyes shone brightly. His heart was pounding. The 6th floor, the 6th floor, Situ, Lu Yun muttered to himself. The light in his eyes seemed to contain 2 seas of fire, burning fiercely. Yes, the 6th floor. The right guardian was very excited. How could he not know what it meant to set foot on the 6th floor? Based on his combat power alone, he could be mentioned on equal terms with a royal grade genius. There's still one more floor. On the 6th floor, Su Yi paused his footsteps slightly. He sensed everything around him, and the pressure was still rising. Boom! Suddenly, a thunderclap tore through the sky and resounded. The entire world rumbled, shaking the void and causing the entire universe to rumble. Walala! Suddenly, the void was oppressed for no reason. Above the sky, a thick layer of dark clouds covered the sky. In a few breaths, the dark clouds covered the sky. Lightning flashed in the depths of the dark clouds, and there was a faint rumbling sound of thunder from the depths of the dark clouds, shaking the heavens and earth. An extremely great oppressive aura swept out from this expanse of the heavens and the earth, and it surged through the sky. For no rhyme or reason, it caused one's hair to stand on end and tremble from the depths of one's soul. Everyone was stunned. This scene was too terrifying. A phenomenon. Is this a phenomenon of heaven and earth? A disciple with better eyesight exclaimed. This was a phenomenon of heaven and earth. Then all eyes were fixed on Su Yi. At this moment, there was only one person who could continue to climb up the stairs. Naturally, all the commotion could only be caused by him. This phenomenon of heaven and earth came because of him. He was the one who caused it. On the heaven ascension platform, dark clouds covered the sky and lightning flashed. Su Yi's body was surrounded by a divine halo. His skin was glowing, and there was a dazzling light around him. But at this moment, Su Yi, who was in the middle of it, could feel the terrifying pressure that enveloped him. It was like a huge mountain with a force of 10,000 pounds crushing down on him. From his body to his soul, it was going to crush him. However, in Su Yi's deep gaze, there was still no fear. His hand seals were formed, and a red light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, Su Yi's Origin Supreme art began to circulate. Boom! At this moment, an inviolable aura gushed out from Su Yi's body. It was domineering, fierce, and destructive. It was also at this moment that Su Yi's deep eyes seemed to be burning with raging flames. The Yuan Qi in his body flowed through his wide meridians, and the faint sound of wind and thunder could be heard echoing out from within his body. When the Origin Supreme art began to circulate, Su Yi immediately felt that the pressure on him was greatly reduced. There was an endless stream of vitality gushing out from his body, causing the light around Su-Yi to become even more dazzling. It was like a small sun burning fiercely. Rumble. As if it had felt Su-Yi's aura, the entire Heaven Ascension platform rumbled. Zizi, the void rumbled, dark clouds rolled, and lightning flashed. The faint rumbling of thunder continued in the firmament, as if warning Su-Yi of what he was going to do. Everyone was trembling. This aura was too terrifying, and it made their souls tremble and their hearts tremble. Could it be that this kid still wants to reach the 7th level? On the towering mountain peak, the right guardian's eyes trembled and his heartbeat quickened. If he reaches the 7th level, our Shunjian Gate will prosper. Chapter 407. His aura seems to be getting stronger. On one side of the secret tower of heaven, many people were looking at the young man. They could feel that the young man's aura was even stronger than before. At this moment, Su-Yi's domineering and majestic aura continued to rise, becoming more and more terrifying. His gray robe fluttered in the wind, making him look like a young god of war. On the other 3 sides of the secret tower of heaven, the disciples of the Shunjian Gate did not know what was going on. They could not see, but the terrifying aura had also shrouded and imprisoned them. They could only look up and see that the sky had changed color. The terrifying aura was so impressive that it made them want to bow down and worship it. Suki looked up. The pores on his body were fluctuating with radiance. His body was glowing, crystal clear like a warm jade. Boom! His eyes were as red as the sun. The attribute light gathered around Su-Yi's body was fluctuating, carrying a majestic and destructive aura. He continued to climb up the stairs to the 7th level. Rumble! On the entire Heaven Ascension platform, a vast and mighty pressure surged like the wind and clouds, causing the sky to change color. It enveloped Su-Yi and crushed down on him. It was so terrifying that it caused everyone to tremble uneasily. They felt an incomparable terror in their hearts. Su-Yi was fearless, and he seemed to possess awe-inspiring divine might. He raised his head and strode forward while a divine halo enveloped him, and his entire body was enveloped by crimson light. He emanated a peerlessly overbearing and destructive pressure, and he emanated a shocking, imposing aura. Whoa! Suddenly, the roar of a beast was like a clap of thunder. In the depths of the secret tower of heaven, dark clouds rolled and lightning flashed. The shadow of a ferocious beast suddenly appeared. Awoo! The beast's roar was shocking. An eagle took to the sky, covering half of the sky. An angry ape hammered its chest, towering like a mountain. A fierce tiger was about to pounce, crossing the void. A flood dragon was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws across the sky. This was too shocking. The sky and earth were shaking, and the clouds were surging. At this moment, the entire Shunjian Gate suddenly shook. The tides rose, the mountains shook, dark clouds rolled, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Oh my God, what's happening? Inside the Shunjian Gate, figures jumped out one after another, their eyes filled with fear. Then, their gazes followed the shaking heaven and earth and looked in the direction of the secret tower of heaven. There was a burst of divine light. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and the clouds surged. It was shocking. It's the secret tower of heaven. What's happening? In the Divine Sword sect, some of the strong cultivators' faces changed. They rose into the air and flew towards the heavenly platform. The secret tower of heaven was even more majestic chi. The disciples on the other 3 sides could only see the void above the sky ascension platform trembling, lightning flashing and thunder rumbling, and the light was hazy. Within the vast expanse of dark clouds, ferocious beasts descended with incomparably terrifying auras, causing the entire world to become blurry. The ferocious beast phantoms swooped down towards Su-Yi, as if they wanted to crush Su-Yi. But if he was at the same level of cultivation, he would have knelt on the ground and been crushed by the chi. However, Su-Yi still held his head high. His body was covered by a light shield, and there was a red light erupting. He stepped up fearlessly. The secret tower of heaven's secret tower of heaven collided directly with the light of Su Yi's secret tower of heaven. Buzz, buzz. Every time the secret tower of heaven and earth collided, the creatures in this area seemed to be able to hear the sound of wind and thunder. It was deafening, resounding through the sky, and there was a burst of dazzling light. Every time the secret tower of heaven and earth collided, it became more and more difficult for Su Yi to climb up the secret tower of heaven. His speed gradually slowed down, but he still stood with his head held high. That's terrifying. Everyone who could see this scene was dumbstruck, and their faces turned pale with fright. Many powerhouses of the Shunjian Gate had already appeared in the void around the secret tower of heaven. They saw everything on the secret tower of heaven. When all the powerhouses of the Shunjian Gate saw the commotion caused by the young man, they were all dumbfounded. Their faces were full of shock. Someone is going up to the 7th level. No wonder. Is there going to be another heaven-defying monster in the Shunjian Gate? More and more powerhouses of the Shunjian Gate gathered around. When they saw everything, they were dazzled. No wonder the Shunjian Gate was in turmoil. There was actually a disciple who was going up to the 7th level. The secret tower of heaven was mighty, and the energy was turbulent. He stepped up with his head held high and his chest out. His eyes were cold and red as he walked up step by step. Percent unspecified currency. Look at the X section of the BA version. PM with every step, the secret tower of heaven under Su Yi's feet seemed to be shaking. There were cracks spreading out from under his feet. Rumble. On the 50th step, the secret tower of heaven and earth began to disappear gradually. Dark clouds rolled, lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and lightning flashed. The thick dark clouds gradually filled with palpitating silver lightning. Arcs of lightning wreaked havoc, bringing with it a terrifying pressure. On the peak of the mountain, the right guardian and Situ Liu Yun's eyes were like torches as they locked onto the secret tower of heaven in the distance. This is already the heavenly might. It can crush one's will. If one can withstand it, they will have to have heaven-grade talent. Situ Liu Yun said. At this moment, there were great waves in his heart. The secret tower of heaven was set up by the ancestors of the Shunjian Gate. It was connected to the heavens and earth. If one wanted to reach the 7th level, they would have to be able to challenge the heavenly might and have heaven-grade talent. Otherwise, they would be crushed. Moreover, Su Yi wanted to reach the 7th level with his own strength. This was challenging the heavenly might with his own strength. He would probably be crushed even more severely. The right guardian did not speak. He was already dumbfounded. The heavenly might crushed one's will. That kid was using his own will to challenge the heavenly might. It was too fierce. If he could succeed, even if this kid's talent was mediocre, with his own strength, he would be more powerful than a heaven-grade talent. Amidst the lightning and thunder, Su Yi's black hair fluttered in the wind as he continued to climb the stairs. Rumble, chilala. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Arcs of lightning gathered and fell toward Su Yi. Bolts of lightning fell on Su Yi's divine ring and then disappeared. Thunder and lightning shocked the world. Lightning and divine might were released at the same time, destroying everything. This side of the world was surging up and down. It was too terrifying. Every bolt of lightning that landed on Su Yi's divine ring of light gave off a deafening sound that resembled a thunderclap. With every step that Su Yi took, the secret tower of heaven trembled. It was as if he was stepping on everyone's souls. It made their souls tremble and their hearts tremble. Su Yi is too terrifying. In this myriad sword conference, is he going to turn the tables and fight against the top geniuses of the sect? Everyone was trembling in fear. That was a young war god. It was too terrifying. Is he that Su Yi that you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel? Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.